Chapter 982. On second thought, he felt that he was just imagining things. The strange places in the human world were all masterpieces left behind by the Thousand Swords demon monarch before he died. They were all targeted at the people of the immortal world and the netherworld, especially the people of the immortal world, who had a hint of unwillingness to die. Looking at the divine sword in his hand, he muttered in his heart. Where did the remaining 9,999 divine swords go? It was said that the demon monarch of swords died in this world, so the remaining divine swords should be in this world. Why didn't he leave any trace? Where did he hide them? If he could collect all the remaining divine swords and control them to fight against the enemy, how many people could stop him? That feeling must be very pleasurable. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. He felt that he wanted to be the second demon monarch of swords. It was a bit whimsical. He put away the divine sword and looked back at the sealed entrance to the demon world. He didn't know whether Yan Zhuixing's trip to the demon world was a good or bad thing. Would he really come out alive to take revenge as he wished? Even the demon monarch of the demon world couldn't open the seal of the demon world from the inside. Did Yan Zhuixing have that ability? It probably wouldn't be that easy to come out. Otherwise, the seal left by the demon monarch of swords would be worthless. Even if he had that ability, would he, Yan Zhuixing, really open the seal of the demon world and let the heroes of the demon world wreak havoc in the human world? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and denied this idea. From Yan Zhuixing's previous actions, it could be seen that he still had a bottom line. Unless he had no other choice, he wouldn't be willing to let the people of the demon world out easily. After all, his family was still in the human world. Unless he had the ability to lead the heroes of the demon world, opening the seal of the demon world wouldn't benefit him at all. Brother Yan, revenge breeds revenge. When will it end? You'd better die in there. That way, everyone will be saved from trouble. Yu Qianqiu looked at the seal of the demon world and murmured. He was too lazy to think about it anymore. In short, even if Yan Zhuixing could come out, it wouldn't happen in a short time. It was a good thing that he was gone. At least the human world didn't have to worry about him for the time being. He then dashed to the surface of the lake quickly. How is she? In Furong's room, Yu Qianqiu looked out of the window for a long time and asked this question. The person he was asking was none other than the enchantress of 100 charms that he had always been in a dilemma. Furong, who was behind him, reached out to hold his arm. She shook her head slightly and said, she doesn't seem to care about what happened that day, but anyone can see that her smile isn't as beautiful as before. What's the point? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. It was unknown whether he was talking about himself or the allure seductress. Furong turned around and looked at him. She bit her lip and pondered for a while. She seemed to be a bit hesitant, but in the end, she still couldn't help but ask softly, can you tell me about you and her? At that time, I had just stepped into the cultivation world. Perhaps because he had just recalled this point, when Hibiscus asked, Yu Qianqiu directly told the story of how he met the enchantress until now with a confused look in his eyes. His tone was a little helpless. After listening, Hibiscus was silent for a moment before saying, it seems like Sister Yi really likes you. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and said, in the human world, perhaps I can be considered a relatively successful man. Oftentimes, this kind of man has an irresistible attraction to women. If it was an ordinary, worthless man, how many women would fight to be the first to like him? Especially an outstanding woman like her. I hope she can calm down and not be fooled by the illusion in front of her eyes. In the immortal world, there are many men stronger than me. Perhaps when she sees them in the immortal world, then everything will pass. It's just a momentary impulse. She gave up her position as the sect master for you. Hibiscus gently reminded him, then asked a rather philosophical question, do you have no confidence in yourself or in her? You don't seem to dislike her. These words seemed familiar. He seemed to have heard them in his previous life. Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look at her in surprise. He smiled faintly and said, "It's said that silent people are the best at observing and thinking. I've somewhat underestimated you. No matter when, no matter what you do, I will never underestimate you." Hibiscus lowered her head and softly muttered. Then she raised her head and said, "You should go see her." Yu Qianqiu hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "Let's go together." The reason why he called Hibiscus to go together was because he didn't want to face the temptress alone. However, when he knocked on the door of the temptress's room, he found that there was no need. The women were all in the temptress's room chattering, thinking of ways to make her happy. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had come, the women looked at him and then at the temptress. After the two of them looked at each other, the temptress was still smiling, but Yu Qianqiu seemed to have a guilty conscience as he smiled and said, "They're all here. Hee hee. Then you guys talk, I won't disturb you guys. We want to go out and play." Zi had already jumped in front of him and shouted. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "Now that the Heartless Palace's people are watching, it might not be convenient for you guys to go out. Wait for a while. It's so uncomfortable to stay in the room every day. It's so boring." Zi pouted and said. Yu Qianqiu looked at the women and said hesitantly, "Do you want me to teach you guys a fun game?" The women looked at each other, but Ziyi's eyes lit up and she cheered, "Okay. Okay. Wait for me for a while." After saying that, Yu Qianqiu left. After about an hour, he came back with a box and walked to the table in the living room. He opened the box and poured out a pile of small purple cubes. The women surrounded him curiously, and they all looked confused. They didn't know what it was. Zi reached out and grabbed a handful, and said with her eyes wide open, This is made from the bamboo of the purple bamboo forest. You chopped my master's purple bamboo." Yu Qianqiu did go to the South Sea purple bamboo forest to make this thing. He said disapprovingly, "There are so many bamboos, and they can't be eaten. What's wrong with chopping one? Why are you being so long-winded? If you don't want to play, then go away." "Who said I don't want to play? It's just that when Master finds out, he will definitely scold me." Zi pouted and flipped the things in her hands. She realized that there were all kinds of patterns carved on them. Suddenly, she said in surprise, 80,000, 30,000, east. What are these lines? Middle, 10,000, south. The women also grabbed a few of them and muttered. There were many patterns that they couldn't say, and they looked at each other in confusion. It seemed like no one could recognize what Yu Qianqiu was making. Wow! Bamboo, it's purple bamboo. I want to eat tender bamboo. Where can I find the tender bamboo of purple bamboo? The wild chicken, who was resting on Wu Lishua's shoulder, heard the bamboo and slowly opened its eyes. When it saw the purple bamboo, its eyes lit up. It jumped up and down on Wu Lishua's shoulder and said, "Shuai, I want to eat the tender bamboo of purple bamboo. This is my favorite food." Zi immediately bared her teeth at the wild chicken. Wu Lishua looked at Yu Qianqiu awkwardly. Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and said, "Wild chicken, how much do you know about this purple bamboo?" The wild chicken's eyes showed that it was thinking like a human. It then shook its head and said, "I have a vague impression of it, but I can't remember. Maybe after I go through another calamity, I will remember." "Bad guy, did you get this bamboo? Where did you get it? Take me there. I want to eat it." "Bad guy." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "If you remember, then eat it. If you don't remember, then don't eat it." The wild chicken immediately flapped its wings and flew in front of him. It begged, "No. No. I want to eat it. Get lost." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pushed it to the side, ignoring its protest and cries. He then waved at the women and said, "This thing is called mahjong. I will teach you how to play it now. You know from 1 to 90,000. You also know the north, south, east, west. This is 1 to 9. Chapter 983. In the divine ruin realm, in a huge space under a valley, more than 1,000 people were gathered together. Zhangping led Yu Qianqiu through the crowd and introduced as they walked, a total of 1,131 temple-colored spiders have hatched. These little things are indeed very ferocious, but as expected, the first person they see after hatching is like their biological parent. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. From time to time, he would stop to look at the fist-sized, colorful, and hairy spiders that were climbing on his team members' shoulders. When he got a little closer, the little fellows would immediately scream and wave their sharp forelimbs, assuming an attacking stance. They had a strong desire to attack, and their ferocious nature was undoubtedly revealed. The team member that Yu Qianqiu was facing immediately shushed him. The huge spider that had raised its forelimbs on his shoulder obediently lowered its claws unwillingly. This made Yu Qianqiu very satisfied. If he could not control them, there would be no point in raising them. Zhangping also had one climbing on his shoulder. He stretched out his hand and hooked his finger at it. The huge spider obediently climbed onto his palm and stopped moving. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to take a look and said with a smile, "These little fellows are quite cute. Let's give it a try." This was the second time he had come to see the temple-colored spiders after they hatched. The first time was when he had just hatched and was still in the process of getting along with the team members who had tamed them. This time, when he heard that they could listen to simple instructions, he could not wait to broaden his horizons. Zhangping walked out of the team and clapped his hands. Immediately, 10 team members came out from the basement opposite him. Each of them dragged out a metal cage, which contained the young of 10 types of ferocious beasts, including a python, a scorpion, and a toad. Although they were still small, they were much larger than the tiny temple-colored spiders. The army of heroes had already begun to hunt some ferocious beasts in the ruins of God, so it was naturally not a problem to capture some small things. Even though they were still young, each and every one of them was restlessly rolling around in the cages. "See. Gua gua," they kept banging against the iron cages. It was as if the nature of ferocious beasts was on full display. Dragging these things out was naturally to let the little colored spiders test their skills. The reason why they did not use the big guys to test them was mainly because they were still small, and they were afraid that they would accidentally die. Zhangping gestured to the 10 team members who were pulling the cages. The 10 team members immediately opened the cages and dodged to the side. Almost at the same time when the 10 beasts crawled out of the metal cage, the 1,000 or so team members gave instructions to the temple rainbow spiders on their shoulders. The temple rainbow spiders immediately climbed down from their masters' bodies. In an instant, the group of fellows ran out from under everyone's feet. Their 8 long legs were red with excitement as they charged toward the 10 ferocious beasts. The ground trembled slightly like sifting beans. A large group of colorful, furry, long-legged fellows rushed forward without any regard for their lives. This scene caused Yu Qianqiu's scalp to go slightly numb. Just imagine how it would feel if this group of little fellows climbed onto his body. The 10 ferocious beast cubs immediately sensed danger. They stuck out their tongues, raised their pincers, flashed their claws, and bared their fangs. All of them roared to intimidate the little fellows that were charging over. It did not seem like this was the first time the little fellows had done something like this. They did not charge forward recklessly. Instead, they dispersed with great tacit understanding. They split into 10 groups and surrounded the 10 ferocious beast cubs. They were not in a hurry to attack. Instead, they constantly advanced and retreated from all directions to lure the beasts, causing the 10 ferocious beasts to constantly circle in vigilance. It was as though they could not look at each other. The coiled python seemed to be angered by the little colorful spiders. It attacked with its head and bit one of the little colorful spiders that came over to tease it. Just as it attacked, the group of little colorful spiders behind it immediately jumped up and swarmed over, stabbing their 8 sharp claws deep into the python's body. The coiled python immediately let out a tragic cry and quickly rolled around. However, these little fellows were born with iron bones and were not afraid of being hit. After their claws stabbed into the python's body, they refused to let go. Instead, they opened their fangs and bit wildly. What was even more terrifying was that the little colorful spider in the python's mouth did not take advantage of the python's opening mouth to scream to escape. Instead, it desperately burrowed into the python's mouth, stabbing its sharp claws continuously into the python's lower jaw. As the python rolled around, it immediately alarmed the other ferocious beasts that were surrounded. Seeing how fierce the little fellows were, they all fled. In particular, the giant scorpion's carapace was extraordinarily hard. It used its 2 large pincers to open up a path and immediately knocked over many of the little fellows. However, the little fellows had their own methods. They immediately spat out countless spider webs, forming a large net that trapped the escaping giant scorpion. Chapter 984. After watching the little colored spiders hunting and killing practice, Yu Qianqiu motioned for Zhangpeng to dismiss everyone. Then, Zhangpeng led Yu Qianqiu on a tour of the newly built underground fortifications. The entire underground fortifications extended in all directions like a majestic underground maze. It was impossible for it to not be big enough to accommodate nearly 10,000 people. If not for Zhang Peng's guidance, Yu Qianqiu suspected that he would have gotten lost. Zhang Peng explained the reason why the underground fortifications were built this way along the way, incorporating many concepts of war. First, it was for both offense and defense. It could attack at any time and defend effectively. The second consideration was the comfort of the living quarters. It was not something that could be done in a short amount of time to finish looking at the entire underground fortifications. After glancing at half of it, Yu Qianqiu stopped and smiled. Forget it. Let's just look at this. You must have put a lot of thought into this. With the earth spell that Master taught me, building this underground fortifications is not a difficult task. Zhang Peng said respectfully. Master, are you not going to give any suggestions? Disciples' vision is limited and I'm afraid that there might be some slip-ups. I'm at ease with you handling this. I'll leave this place to you. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand casually and then frowned. You have to keep in touch with Elder Nanming of Flaming Mountain. Look for me if there's any trouble. Disciple understands. Zhang Peng cupped his fists. Yu Qianqiu nodded and disappeared before his eyes. After returning to the World Chamber of Commerce, he walked out of one of the rooms on the 22nd floor and saw Wei Chuanqiu, Yunpeng and De Mingluan standing at the foot of the stairs talking. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. De Mingluan was someone who would not visit for no reason. She must have come for something. He immediately walked and cupped his fists. What a rare guest. Greetings, Master De Mingluan. De Mingluan had just nodded and was about to speak when he suddenly heard a paw sound from the other end of the corridor. It sounded like something hard had been slammed on the table. Then, a delicate shout was heard. Bang! Damn it! Who was the one with such a bad hand? Was there a need to shout so loudly when they just touched the tiles? Yu Qianqiu's expression stiffened. Only then did he remember that there were still people around him. He glanced at the 3 of them and found that they seemed to be used to it. They did not find it strange at all. Clearly, they had been standing there for a while, and this was not the first time they had heard the commotion. Hee hee. A few ignorant women, please excuse us, excuse us. Before Yu Qianqiu could finish his sentence, Zi screamed excitedly, It's burning. It's burning. Little sister Shui, you've lit the cannon. Ha! You don't have any more chips left. It's time for Sister Yan Yu to take over. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Ze was going to take over as well. Little Sister Phoenix, it's all your fault. If you didn't tell me to touch it, I wouldn't have been able to light Purple Cloth's cannon. It was Wu Lishue's voice. Sister Shui, I didn't do it on purpose. It was Pheasant's aggrieved voice. Quickly give way, quickly give way. It's Sister Yan Yu's turn. It was Ziyi's cheerful voice again, followed by the messy sound of mahjong being played. Then, there was the pa-pa-da-da sound of the tiles being put together. The four men listened attentively for a while and looked at each other. De Mingluan frowned and said, "It's burning." "What's burning?" Wei Chuanqiu shook her head and said, "I don't think it's burning anything. I heard that they've been burning for a day or two. How could there be so many things for them to burn? Wouldn't they have burned the entire World Commerce Association?" "Yu Qianqiu, what are they doing?" "Burned the entire World Commerce Association." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and he said awkwardly, "They're playing mahjong." It's a game for fun." With that, the three of them understood. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up and said, "What kind of game is it that they can play for a day or two without stopping? Let's go and take a look." De Mingluan and Yunping glanced at each other. The two of them were also curious. With the mentality of gaining knowledge, they followed. Yu Qianqiu stood dumbstruck on the spot for a while before following behind the three of them. When they pushed open the door and entered, they saw four women surrounding a table. In front of each of them was a long strip made up of small purple cubes. They took turns grabbing small cubes from the long strip on the table to replenish themselves. Then, they took out a small piece and threw it into the pile of small cubes in the middle of the table. There was also a woman with a pheasant on her shoulder. She was watching intently with her hands behind her back. When the few of them entered, these women actually didn't even bother to raise their heads to see who had entered. This made Wei Chuanqiu and the other two even more curious. They all strolled over to watch. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He thought to himself, could it be that these women have never played games before? Was there a need to be so focused on playing mahjong? He immediately coughed and said, "Let's stop for a moment. Let's first greet the seniors." When the women looked up, they immediately stood up and bowed. However, they didn't forget to buckle their mahjong tiles in front of them. This action made Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitch. He coughed again and introduced them to De Mingluan and Yunpeng. As for Wei Chuanqiu, they already knew him. "You don't have to be so polite. You guys continue playing. I'll just watch from the side." Wei Chuanqiu made the decision and gestured for them to stop. Then, she walked to the table and picked up a purple cube to see what it was. Unexpectedly, the pheasant on Wu Lishue's shoulder suddenly shouted, "Green bat, put it down. Don't peek at the tiles." Wei Chuanqiu was startled. The pheasant's words seemed to have some effect on him. He immediately buckled the tile back. The De Mingluan looked at the pheasant curiously. He noticed that it wasn't even at the immortal realm, but it could speak the human language. He immediately classified it as a normal beast cultivator because he had never seen a phoenix before. Seeing the women's uneasiness, the De Mingluan lost interest in watching anymore. He immediately said to Yu Qianqiu, "Come out for a moment. I have something to talk to you about." Then, the four men walked out. Yu Qianqiu asked while walking, "What business does the De Mingluan's wielder have with this junior?" The De Mingluan suddenly stopped and stared at Yu Qianqiu for a moment. Then, he said in a deep voice, "I have the immortal emperor's decree to find you." "Ah!" Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. After looking at Yunpeng and Wei Chuanqiu, he saw that their expressions were a bit strange. It was clear that they already knew why the immortal emperor was looking for him. He immediately became suspicious and said, "The immortal emperor is looking for me. That's impossible. The wielder isn't joking, right?" "It's not a joke." The Demingluan frowned and said, "I won't say any conventional words. Let's be frank. The immortal emperor has decreed that you must compose a song and present it to the immortal emperor and immortal empress Ji Wu at the wedding ceremony. That's it." Yu Qianzhou's mouth was wide open. After a while, he slowly said, "Why? Let me tell you this." The Demingluan paused and explained, "After the World Commerce Association's Miss Liu was taken away by immortal empress Ji Wu, immortal empress Ji Wu really liked the song she played. Later, she found out from her that the songs she played were all composed by you. So, she asked the immortal emperor to let you compose a song that will be passed down for generations to add color to the wedding ceremony. The wedding ceremony is not a child's play. It concerns the immortal emperor's face. For this reason, the immortal emperor personally listened to the Miss Liu play a few songs. He was very satisfied and praised it as the sound of nature. He also praised immortal empress Ji Wu for her good taste. After the immortal emperor confirmed from the Miss Liu that the songs were all composed by you, he immediately summoned me. That's what happened. Tsk tisk. Wei Chuanqiu exclaimed and said with a teasing tone, "Yu Qianzhou, I've known you for so long. How come I didn't know you could play such a literary thing? You really can't judge a book by its cover." A guy who uses profanity every time he opens his mouth can actually play the zither and compose songs. He can even get the praise of the immortal world supreme. Are you going to show us what you've got? Yunpeng nodded slightly with a surprised look in his eyes. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and ignored him on the spot. He gritted his teeth and said, "Liu Yanqing, you're doing stupid things to harm me again." In fact, he really wronged Liu Yanqing this time. In fact, the real culprit was Immortal Crocodile. Ji Wu found out about it from Immortal Crocodile and then faked it from Liu Yanqing. Yu Qianzhou, it doesn't matter if you're willing or not. Since the Immortal Emperor has spoken, no one in the immortal world will dare to disobey his will. You have to do it even if you don't want to. Otherwise, think about the consequences yourself. Demingluan snorted coldly. If you do it well, the benefits you will get will be unattainable by others. Who doesn't want benefits? Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But I don't have the fortune to enjoy it. You want me to make a song that will go down in history? That's a joke. Where did I get that ability? Seeing that he didn't seem to be lying, the three looked at each other. Demingluan frowned. Could it be that the Miss Liu was lying? That those songs weren't written by you? You can't joke about this. It's not just about you anymore. If anything happens, even the two of them will be implicated. He pointed at Wei Chuanqiu and Yunpeng. Yu Qianzhou was startled. He said helplessly, "I did it, but I didn't ask her to spread it around." He couldn't say it out loud. If he was dealing with an ordinary person, he could just plagiarize one or two songs from his previous life. But the Immortal Emperor wanted him to make a song that would go down in history. Was there a song that would go down in history in his previous life? Hearing him say this, Demingluan heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Since it was done by you, then do your best. I'm not forcing you to do it immediately. There's still half a year until the wedding." Then he smiled meaningfully. "This matter will be of great benefit to you. Can't you see it?" "What benefit?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Demingluan said indifferently, "How many people in the immortal world can get the immortal emperor's decree to do things? With this decree on you, who would dare to touch you? Plus, the entire immortal palace will have to cooperate with you. Isn't this a great benefit?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes suddenly lit up. His expression didn't look awkward at all. He licked his lips and said, "In other words, during this period of time, I can do whatever I want in the immortal world. De Mingluan frowned and said, doing whatever you want is a bit too much, but as long as it's not too much. Before he finished speaking, Yu Qianqiu had already rolled up his sleeves and interrupted him arrogantly, Heartless Palace. Damn it. Help me destroy the Heartless Palace first. Chapter 985. What was the singing of a liberated serf? Yu Qianqiu understood it now. He understood it as a song that could change one's fate. This was a release that had been suppressed for a long time. He had been in the celestial world for such a long time, but he had never gone out. Because he had offended the Heartless Palace, he had been trapped in the hallucinatory immortal city. Today, now, he suddenly felt that the sky was high and the earth was wide. He could go anywhere and show off his skills again. How wonderful would it be to use the power of the Celestial Palace to get rid of the Heartless Palace? Yunpeng and Wei Chuanqiu looked at each other. Wei Chuanqiu chuckled, that's a good idea. Let the Celestial Palace get rid of the Heartless Palace first, hee. De Mingluan's expression was already ugly. When he saw Wei Chuanqiu joining in the fun, his expression became even uglier. He glared at him and said in a low voice, Yu Qianqiu, what kind of sweet dream are you having? Did you forget what I said just now? The Celestial Palace will only help you if it's not too much. Too much? Yu Qianqiu asked Wei Chuanqiu instead. Wei Chuanqiu chuckled and cooperated, this, really is too much. There are so many sects in the celestial world. One less Heartless Palace is nothing. Plus, it's not difficult for the Celestial Palace to get rid of the Heartless Palace. Yes. Yu Qianqiu immediately followed up. His eyes lit up as he nodded, that's right. It's not too much. Get rid of the Heartless Palace. He almost applauded Wei Chuanqiu. De Mingluan looked up and down at Yu Qianqiu. He could see that this guy didn't have a chance in the past. Now that he had one, he immediately asked for a sky-high price. He wanted to get rid of the number one sect in the celestial world. He snorted and sneered, why is the Heartless Palace so arrogant in the celestial world? Because with his strength, he didn't dare to get along well with everyone in the immortal world. If that was the case, the immortal emperor would have destroyed them long ago. The sect master of Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, knows very well that the celestial emperor wants them to be the vanguard to balance the forces in the celestial world. The celestial emperor can't control the celestial world by relying on his subordinates to kill. Killing can only suppress the celestial world temporarily, not forever. Do you understand what I mean? Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered, and he said, you mean to say that the immortal palace can't do many things without a good reason? They're afraid that it will cause conflict, so they let the Heartless Palace be the sucker. It's good that you understand, but your knowledge is still too shallow. The Great Bright Will coldly stared at him and slowly said, how do you think the immortal emperor was able to control the immortal world for so many years? This was the balancing act of a monarch, and it was not something that could be achieved by having a high cultivation and blindly slaughtering. No matter how strong the immortal palace is, they can't be the enemy of the entire celestial world forever. Unless the immortal emperor kills everyone. In reality, the Heartless Palace has been pushed to the teeth of the storm, and it has many strong enemies. It can only listen to the immortal palace. The immortal palace can wipe it out right away, and the sects in the celestial world will clap their hands. No one will say that the immortal palace is bullying people. If one Heartless Palace falls, the immortal palace will support a second Heartless Palace to help the immortal palace do things that offend people. I understand. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be happy anymore, and he nodded. This is a good method. This way, the immortal palace only needs to use blood and iron to deal with a small portion of people. This way, it won't make too many people dislike them, and it won't be the enemy of the entire celestial world. It can also maintain its deterrence towards the celestial world. So, it's not realistic for the immortal palace to wipe out the heartless palace for you. Of course. De Mingluan sneered. If you, Yu Qianqiu, have the ability to replace the heartless palace in the celestial world, I think the immortal emperor might agree to help you wipe out the heartless palace and make you the second heartless palace. But with the World Commerce Association's current strength, the immortal emperor probably won't even consider this request. After all, the charm of a song from you, Yu Qianqiu, isn't enough to mess up his empire. Damn. If I had the power to replace the heartless palace, why would I need the immortal emperor's help? I would have done it myself. Yu Qianqiu laughed at himself. Wei Chuanqiu snickered. Yun Peng snorted. The human heart is indeed the most sinister. Actually, it doesn't matter to you whether you wipe out the heartless palace or not. You've accepted the immortal emperor's decree. At least the heartless palace won't dare to do anything to you now. Even in the entire celestial world, not many people would dare to do anything to you. De Mingluan said with a hint of ridicule. Yu Qianqiu didn't hold back anymore. Since the De Mingluo was willing to say such things to him, he didn't have anything to hide. He immediately asked, then what about after the immortal emperor's wedding? Can he still guarantee my safety? You're really thinking far ahead. De Mingluan couldn't help but say, if you make the immortal emperor happy, no matter who wants to harm you, they will have to consider the immortal emperor's emotions. It shouldn't be a problem to guarantee your safety for a year or two. Or, as long as you're brave enough, when the immortal emperor gives you a reward, you can talk about the conditions. Ask him to guarantee your safety for the rest of your life. That way, no one will dare to touch you in the future. Talk about conditions with the immortal emperor. Yu Qianqiu was suspicious and asked, is there any use? Has there ever been a successful negotiation before? De Mingluan paused and said, most of them died without a complete corpse. You might be an exception. As soon as he said this, Wei Chuanqiu immediately laughed, and Yun Peng also smiled. Only Yu Qianqiu's face turned green and he said in a low voice, what's the difference between this and asking me to die? Since you can't help me destroy the heartless palace, I want something else. Give me a netherworld token first and we'll talk about the rest later. Everyone was startled and De Mingluan asked strangely, what do you want a netherworld token for? With your world commerce's foundation, do you want to go to the netherworld to make a fortune? If it's really for money, isn't this a good opportunity to make a fortune? The immortal palace can't guarantee anything else, but its wealth is unparalleled in the immortal world. You've reminded me, I want money too. Yu Qianqiu nodded in realization. He would rather eat the wrong thing than let it go. He then changed the topic and explained, as for the netherworld token, it's naturally to go to the netherworld to collect information. Don't you know what collecting information is? It's useless to ask. Didn't the immortal emperor want me to make a song that will be passed down for generations? So I want to travel around to broaden my horizons and experience. Only by accumulating enough material can I make a really good song. The netherworld is naturally an indispensable place for collecting information, so I want a netherworld token. Collecting information. De Mingluan was startled. Does it mean accumulating information before it explodes? Yes, it means accumulating information before it explodes. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and flattered, as expected of the leader of the Commerce Alliance. You said what I wanted to say with just 4 words. De Mingluan ignored his flattery and said, if that's the case, then wait for my news. It shouldn't be a big problem. Money. Don't forget there's still money. Collecting information requires money. It's hard to do anything without money. The more the better. Yu Qianqiu quickly shouted. However, De Mingluan had already left, so he didn't know if he heard it or not. You can do whatever you want in the celestial world now. You can do whatever you want with Jintai's decree. Hee hee. Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and laughed. Yunping felt bored and left in a flash. Yu Qianqiu seemed to have thought of something and didn't listen to Wei Chuanqiu's joke. He walked around the corridor and suddenly frowned. Bat King Wei, since De Mingluan received the decree directly from Jin Tai, do you think this news has spread in the celestial world? Wei Chuanqiu was startled and said, it probably hasn't spread out yet. But do you hope it has, or do you hope it hasn't? Of course I want it to spread. No, I have to ask someone to help me spread the news. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and then left excitedly. Wei Chuanqiu was left alone in the corridor. Just as he was about to go back to where he was supposed to go, he suddenly heard a "pa" sound of something hard hitting the table. Ziyi's extremely wild laughter came. Touch yourself. Touch myself. Wei Chuanqiu's mouth twitched. He sighed and shook his head. The words of girls nowadays are really scary. Although he said that, he couldn't help but feel curious. He slowly walked towards the place where the splashing sound came from. In the hall of the first floor of World Commerce, Yunantian was inexplicably found by Yu Qianqiu's people. Have you heard any news about me recently? Basically no. Only Tsangyan Aksayan of the Heartless Palace released some harsh words against you. He said that he will tear you into pieces and grind your bones into ashes sooner or later. Damn. Old bastard, wait and see. Let's not talk about him. That. Is there any news that Immortal Emperor Jin personally issued a decree for me to compose a song for the wedding of Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress Ji Wu? Immortal Emperor personally issued a decree for you. Ah. How is this possible? Where did the punishment master hear this from? Bullshit. This is not a rumor. This is reliable news. Here's the thing. Just do this for me. The two hid in the corner of the hall and whispered for a while, causing others to look at them from time to time. They didn't know what the two were plotting. In the end, Yunantian happily walked out of World Commerce. No one knew what he was going to do. Actually, what Yu Qianqiu asked him to do was very simple. He just wanted him to spread the news that Immortal Emperor Jin ordered him to compose a song, the kind that had to be widely spread. As for the purpose, it was also very simple. He thought that after being suppressed in the immortal world for too long, it was time for him to hold his head high. It would be a pity if he didn't take advantage of such a good opportunity. However, he was afraid that others didn't know about such a big matter. It would be bad if he was accidentally hurt, so he wanted Yunantian to go out and spread the news. Today, he was very patient. He walked around with his hands behind his back for a long time. When Yunantian came back, he hurriedly went up and asked, "Has the news been spread?" The news spread very fast. It has already started to reach my ears. Yunantian smiled. Not bad. Not bad. You do your thing. I'm going out for a walk. Yu Qianqiu whistled and walked out of World Commerce with his hands behind his back. Looking at his behavior, no one knew what he wanted to do. Chapter 986. The mountain spring flowed down the waterfall. Under the impact of the water, the four words World Commerce Association were still majestic and showed the vitality of the World Commerce Association. The creator of these four words was standing on top of the waterfall with his hands behind his back, enjoying the bright sunlight and breathing in the free air. The waterfall flows down 3,000 feet, like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Good poem, good poem. The poetic Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but praise himself. He glanced at the four people staring at him from the sky. From their clothes, they were still disciples of Heartless Palace. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart. With the power of Heartless Palace, it was impossible that they hadn't received the news. This Qin Yun Xan was probably still verifying the credibility of the news. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to send people to watch him after he knew that he was working for the Immortal Emperor, F***CKU. Who's afraid of who? I'm the Imperial Envoy now. A stream of light shot out from the waterfall and flew directly towards the central plaza of Hallucination Immortal City. The sea of clouds was vast and mighty, tens of thousands of mountains stood in the middle, and all kinds of streams of light rose and fell, showing the extraordinariness of the most prosperous place in the immortal world. The plaza was bustling, no different from a market in the human world. The human world sold the daily necessities of mortals, while the immortal world sold the daily necessities of immortals. The only difference was that they were on a different level. The extravagant desire of the human heart, whether it was an immortal or a mortal, all roads led to the same destination. There were countless stalls on the plaza, selling all kinds of things that could be sold. However, the items that were set up here were usually not of a high grade. The truly valuable items were all in the grand buildings at the top of the mountains, but the liveliness of the plaza was far greater than the mountains. It could be seen that whether it was the immortal world or the mortal world, the poor would always be the majority. Those disciples wearing the clothing of the large sects shuttled through the crowd and occasionally stopped at a stall. Regardless of their cultivation, they revealed a condescending aura as they asked the stall owner for the price. Meanwhile, those stall owners bowed and fawned over them, not daring to offend them. Even though they were being careful, most of the time, they were met with extremely belittling and disdainful tones from the customers. Even if the customers were to do them the honor of buying one or two items, don't even think about how generous these customers would be. It was already good enough if they didn't suppress the price. Yu Qianqiu paced back and forth in the vast sea of people. He smiled and looked at the world with his cold eyes. Occasionally, he would raise his head to look at the 4 disciples of Heartless Palace who were protecting him. Even though he'd stayed in the illusory immortal city for a long time, he'd rarely come to this place. He'd only come here once or twice before the World Trading Company was established. Now that he'd relaxed, he finally had the leisure to come out and take a stroll. People who set up stalls in such places were considered to be the lowest rung in the immortal world. Not many people had seen Yu Qianqiu before. Even if they had seen him once or twice, with how he, Yu Qianqiu, dressed in an unusually low-key manner, who would have seen a sect master with a storage pouch on his waist? In addition to his ordinary appearance, there was nothing special about him when he was thrown into a crowd. If they weren't familiar with him and didn't look at him face to face, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize that he was the sect master of the World Trading Company, Yu Qianqiu. Most people's gazes only flashed past his face and didn't linger. Because of this, his mood became more relaxed as he strolled. In reality, he quite liked to stroll around aimlessly like this. There was no restraint of entering a room, no effort of scheming and scheming. Looking at the hundreds of people, they saw him as nothing more than an ordinary idler. Along the way, he could hear many people talking about him. They were all talking about the matters that the immortal emperor had personally decreed for him to do. Yu Qianqiu ignored them and strolled with a faint smile on his lips. As he walked, he was suddenly attracted by a refreshing fragrance. He took a deep breath and felt his spirits lift. He looked around and didn't know where the fragrance was coming from. This kind of fragrance was very attractive to him. He wondered who was selling fragrant things. It wouldn't be a bad idea to buy some and put it in his room. He cupped his hands and asked a man who was walking towards him, "May I ask this friend, where can I find something with this kind of strange fragrance?" He pointed around and then at his own nose. The man was startled. He took a few more deep breaths, but he didn't smell any fragrance. Instead, he smelled the body odors of all kinds of people passing by. He frowned and said, "Where is this fragrance coming from?" He waved his sleeves and left, treating him as a lunatic. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He couldn't smell such a special fragrance. There must be something wrong with his nose. He then asked a few passers-by, but the answers he got were more or less the same. No one smelled any fragrance. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but be startled in the crowd. He touched his nose and asked himself, could it be that there was something wrong with his nose? But he felt that it wasn't right. If there was something wrong with his nose, he shouldn't be able to smell anything. If that was the case, his nose was unusually sensitive. I'll find it myself. Yu Qianqiu took 2 deep breaths. Then, like a hunting dog, he sniffed the air with his nose and moved around the crowd, following the fragrance. The area of the square was not small, so he spent a lot of time looking for it. The 4 heartless palace disciples in the air looked at each other. They didn't know why he was wandering around like a headless fly. At the edge of the square, the crowd gradually thinned. Yu Qianqiu swayed out from the crowd and sniffed in front of him. He was stunned. Below the cliff in front of him was an old tree with a crooked neck. Its old roots were deeply rooted in the crevices of the cliff, its lush green leaves extended out like a giant parasol. A white sail was hanging from the branches, swaying in the wind. Huang Xiaolong couldn't see what was written on it. Under the shade of the tree, there were 2 tables and stools. A slightly hunched old man with white hair and a little girl around 13 or 14 years old were serving bowls of food to the customers. There weren't many customers. One of the tables was empty, while the other only had a single customer. Yu Qianqiu's nose twitched again, sniffing again. After confirming that the fragrance came from that stall, he was speechless. He thought it was selling something, but it was actually food. Shaking his head, Huang Xiaolong slowly walked over. When he reached the bottom of the tree, he saw the words written on the white sail, green clear, 1 divine grade spirit stone per bowl. What kind of thing was green clear, selling a bowl for 1 divine grade spirit stone? Yu Qianqiu turned back to look at the square. There weren't many people who could sell something for 1 divine grade spirit stone, not to mention a bowl of food. No wonder business was so bad. Honored guest. Would you like to have a bowl of green clear? An old man in hemp robes walked over, greeting enthusiastically. The old man's face was sagging, his eyes were cloudy, and with a head full of white hair and a slightly hunched back, one look was enough to tell that he was not young. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head, a wry smile on his face. Old man, it's not that I want to criticize you, but the things you sell here are really expensive. Forget it. I came here after smelling your aroma, it can be considered fate. Just take it as taking care of your business. I'd like to try something new. Give me a bowl. Hee hee. Honored guest, please wait a moment. The hunchbacked old man hurried to his counter. Yu Qianqiu sat on another empty seat, looking at the bustling crowd in front of him. The shade under the tree had a different kind of flavor to it. A short while later, the budding young lady in green robes came over with a yellow wooden bowl, her voice crisp and clear. Honored guest, please enjoy. Inside the bowl was a wooden ladle soup of the same color, and inside the bowl was a lush green jelly that was pleasing to the eye. A refreshing fragrance assaulted his nostrils. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was the same fragrance he had smelled earlier. He hoped this fragrance was worth a divine grade spirit stone. Picking up the ladle soup, he scooped up a spoonful of lush green jelly, but when it reached his mouth, he couldn't help exclaiming in surprise. He sniffed twice with his nose and discovered that the refreshing fragrance did not come from this bowl of green clear, but he tilted his head and sniffed at the green-robed young lady who had just turned to leave. He couldn't resist putting down the bowl and sniffing behind the young lady's butt. Smelling like a pig snoring, how could the green-robed young lady not notice? Startled, she spun around, but seeing Huang Xiaolong's lecherous appearance, she retreated in panic. What are you trying to do? Grandfather. She was completely treating him like a pervert, guarding against him. Yu Qianqiu blanked for a second, looking at this young lady's delicate features and fair skin. It was obvious she was a beauty in the making. When she grew up, she would definitely be a beauty. Huang Xiaolong waved his hand awkwardly. Don't misunderstand, don't misunderstand. No matter how much of a pervert he was, he had not fallen to the point of laying his hands on a young lady. The slightly hunchbacked old man also put down the work in his hands, blocking in front of the green-robed young lady, asking solemnly, "Honored guest, why are you doing this?" The customers at the other table snickered, winking at Yu Qianqiu as if they were kindred spirits. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him. He cupped his hands at the grandfather-granddaughter pair. "I'm really ashamed, please don't misunderstand. It was because I smelled a sweet fragrance, that's why I followed it here. I thought it was the fragrance from the bowl, but when I picked up the bowl just now, I realized that the fragrance came from this young lady, so I couldn't help but sniff a few times. My apologies for being abrupt, please don't misunderstand." After saying that, he obediently returned to his seat. The hunchbacked old man's eyes suddenly flashed with a bright light. He sized up Yu Qianqiu with a meaningful gaze, then turned to the green-robed young lady and chuckled, Don't be nervous, it's just a misunderstanding." The customer at the other table suddenly picked up his bowl and sat next to Yu Qianqiu, smiling as he transmitted his voice. "Brother really has a good eye. The excuse of smelling a beauty is not bad, but there's a first come, first served rule for everything. I saw this little beauty first. I'm Wangu Tong's disciple, my apologies." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the person's robe, but didn't say anything. He scooped up a spoonful of the green liquid and put it into his mouth. As a result, it melted in his mouth, turning into a refreshing liquid that flowed into his stomach. At the same time, his mouth was filled with a natural sweetness that lingered in the aftertaste. The taste was indeed not bad. He picked up a few spoonfuls of the green liquid and slowly savored the aftertaste. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was ignoring him, the person at the side was about to flare up, but he noticed that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, so he swallowed his anger and slapped the table. "Bill." The green-robed young lady ran over, clasping her hands excitedly. Her sweet voice sounded, "1 piece of divine grade spirit stone." It was as if she had never seen money before. Chapter 987. Yu Qianqiu agreed with Huang Xiaolong's reasoning. Although the taste of this green clear wasn't bad, a simple stall selling food for a piece of divine grade spirit stone was indeed a little too expensive. Most likely, no one would patronize this stall. Thus, it was understandable that this little girl was excited when she heard that he was going to pay. What? A bowl of food like this is worth a piece of divine grade spirit stone. That person's eyebrows rose as he slammed the table, barking, "Aren't you trying to scam me? I'm Wangu Tong's disciple, how dare you scam me, are you tired of living?" Watching the bowl in front of him bouncing from the slap, Yu Qianqiu shot a cold glance over. He wanted to see what kind of method this guy was going to use to get his hands on this lass. The lass in green looked at her grandfather behind her in a fluster, not knowing how to deal with this situation. The hunchbacked old man quickly walked over, pointing at the white sail hanging on the tree with a smile. "Honored customer, this is a business with a clear price. I would not dare to scam people." "Not dare to scam people? Does that mean you're scamming people on purpose?" That person sneered. "Old thing, you really have guts, daring to scam our Wangu Tong." The hunchbacked old man frowned, then sighed. Forget it. It can be considered fate that an honored customer could visit my stall. This bowl of green clear is a free gift." "Honored customer, please go ahead, Lu." It was obvious that he didn't want to cause trouble. The lass called Lu pouted, feeling wronged. Her hand reached out to collect the bowl and spoon on the table, but who knew that her hand would be caught by that person? "Little girl, you don't look too happy. Are you giving me a hard time?" That person's hands rubbed the pair of soft hands with a lascivious smile on his face. The lass in green panicked, crying out, "Grandfather." She didn't know what to do. Damn it. Disappointing. Yu Qianqiu didn't expect to run into such a situation when he went out to eat. This world was really ruled by evil people. Without a second thought, a kick flew out from under the table, landing on that person's foot. The person lost his balance and fell onto the table. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything else, and with a "Fu," he punched him in the face. Bang! That person was sent flying several meters away. Blood spurted out from his mouth and nose in the air. The sudden turn of events scared the little girl so much that she shrank into the arms of the hunchbacked old man. She looked at the customer who committed the crime. He was sitting there quietly, eating the green clear in his bowl as if nothing had happened. The hunchbacked old man patted the little girl in his arms and said, "It's okay, it's okay." He looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head. The commotion immediately attracted the attention of the people on the square. Seeing that someone actually dared to beat someone up in the hallucinatory immortal city, especially when they saw that the person who was beaten up was Wang Gutong's disciple, a commotion broke out. The 4 disciples of the Heartless Palace who were watching him looked at each other. The person who was knocked unconscious shook his head and quickly got up. He wiped the blood from his nose and mouth. He didn't expect to be beaten up in the hallucinatory immortal city. He pointed at Yu Qianqiu and roared, "Who are you? How dare you attack me, Wang Gutong?" He really wanted to rush up and take revenge, but he didn't have the guts to break the hallucinatory immortal city's rules. "You alone can't represent Wang Gutong. Since you ate someone else's food, you should pay up honestly, don't embarrass Wang Gutong." Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at the person. In reality, he was also restricted by the hallucinatory immortal city's rules, otherwise he would have taken the person's life on the spot. Don't count on this kind of person to turn over a new leaf. Leaving him alive would be a disaster, so killing him was the best solution. However, with this tilt of his head, under everyone's watchful eyes, many people recognized him and whispered to each other, "So it's Yu Qianqiu." As the words Yu Qianqiu spread, the disciple who was beaten stiffened. Even though he had never seen Yu Qianqiu before, he knew that Yu Qianqiu had close ties with many of Wang Gutong's higher-ups. Especially Elder Wang Gutong, who was in charge of this place. He called Yu Qianqiu brother. Even Wan Bushing's precious granddaughter, Wan Ling, had frequent dealings with Yu Qianqiu. The two of them had even held hands in the godly ruins realm. This was something that many people had seen with their own eyes. This guy took a beating for nothing. Many people in the crowd laughed out loud. That Wang Gutong disciple rubbed the place where he was beaten, his eyes filled with resentment as he glared at Yu Qianqiu, but he dared not utter a word, turning around to leave with his tail between his legs. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would harumph coldly, "Leave the money for the food to the boss before you leave. Don't tell me your Wang Gutong has the habit of eating and dashing." The resentment in that disciple's eyes deepened, but after rummaging through his storage bracelet, he discovered that there was still a gap to the amount of 1 divine-grade spirit stone. In truth, no matter which sect it was, to the higher-ups, a few 100 million or even a few billion divine-grade spirit stones were nothing, but to the disciples, 1 divine-grade spirit stone was not a small amount. After a brief moment of awkwardness, that disciple cupped his fists at Yu Qianqiu. "I hope sect master you can be magnanimous, allow me to go back and retrieve the money." Yu Qianqiu turned around, silently eating his food by the spoonful, ignoring that disciple, letting him do as he saw fit. The hunchbacked old man smiled at that disciple. It's fine, 1 bowl of food, it's free, no charge." That disciple looked at Yu Qianqiu, gritting his teeth, and flew away without a word. As the saying goes, good news never goes out, but bad news travels 1,000 li. While the crowd was watching Yu Qianqiu slowly eating his food, whispers and whispers could be heard. Several lights flickered in the air. The Wang Gutong disciple who had just run away was dragged back by someone. The person in the lead was none other than the Wang Gutong elder overseeing this place, Wang Yi. Seeing Yu Qianqiu, Wang Yi broke out in laughter. "Sect Master Yu is indeed in a good mood, actually hiding here to enjoy delicious food. It's not really in a good mood, just stealing half a day of leisure." Yu Qianqiu also laughed heartily, as if nothing had happened between the two of them. Wang Yi walked up to Yu Qianqiu, noticing the oily green stuff in his bowl. He clicked his tongue in surprise. "What is this stuff? How come I've never seen it before?" Then he waved his hand at the grandfather and grandson. Come, give me a bowl too. He sat down opposite Yu Qianqiu. When the bowl of green clear food was placed on the table, Wang Yi took a small sip and nodded. It really has a unique flavor. Then he put down the spoon in his hand, ready to get down to business. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a wide smile. I wonder what my sect's disciple did to offend you, making you, great sect master you, personally make a move. I've already brought the person here, have him apologize to you. Both of them were smart people. It was easy to understand the meaning behind Wang Yi's words. On the surface, Wang Yi said he was here to apologize, but in reality, he was here to ask, you injured my, Wan Gu Tong's, disciple just for a piece of divine grade treasure? Aren't you not giving my Wan Gu Tong face? Wang Yi also understood that he couldn't do anything to Yu Qianqiu, but as the sect master overseeing this place, if he didn't say anything when his disciple was beaten up, he would lose face. He also believed that Yu Qianqiu was not an idiot. He would at least give him some face and let him step down. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would tilt his head to look at the disciple, nonchalantly saying, there's no need for an apology. In my opinion, this kind of shameless disciple is a scourge if you keep him around, and it's also a disgrace to you, Wan Gu Tong. Why don't you just kill him and end all troubles once and for all? The moment Wang Yi said that, the disciple panicked, looking nervously at Wang Yi. Wang Yi's face tightened slightly, his voice solemn. Sect master Yu's words, I don't understand. Then why don't you ask him what he did? Yu Qianqiu harumphed coldly, snickering coldly as he said, the food is clearly priced, you can choose not to eat it if you don't have money, it's not like it's something you can't live without. It doesn't matter if you don't have money to eat it, with your face as Elder One overseeing this place, I'll pay for it on his behalf without him even asking. What's more hateful is that he actually accused Wang Yi of swindling people, saying that Wang Yi's guts aren't small, daring to swindle Wan Gu Tong's people, using this as a pretext to grope the little girl in front of everyone, and even treating this old man like he's the same kind of trash. This is intolerable. Luckily this happened in the hallucinatory immortal city, otherwise this old man would have killed him on the spot. So that's how it is. The surrounding crowd hissed. Wang Yi tilted his head, glaring coldly at the disciple, barking, is sect master Yu's words true? The disciple stuttered with fear, stammering. Wang Yi sneered, you really dare to give our Wan Gu Tong face, cripple his cultivation, and request the sect master to expel him from the sect. Being the overseer of this place, he had the authority to enforce the law, but he didn't have the authority to expel a disciple from the sect. I know I was wrong, elder, spare me, aw. A miserable shriek rang out, the disciple wilted on the spot. His dantian was shattered by an expert from the same sect, his cultivation was crippled, and he was carried away by the other sect master. In the immortal world, this was merely the tragic end of a small fry that couldn't even cause a ripple. To those big shots, for the sake of their own reputation or the reputation of their organization, or for other reasons, the lives of small fries were nothing more than something they could casually take, not worth mentioning. However, it was enough to make those small fries tremble with fear, thinking that Wan Gu Tong was strict in enforcing the law, but in truth, there were countless disciples like this in the big sections. That disciple was just unlucky enough to run into Yu Qianqiu's hands. The little girl in green who was hiding behind her grandfather would occasionally poke her head out to look at Yu Qianqiu, her eyes brimming with curiosity. Wang Yi waved his hand, the other disciples immediately turned into streaks of light and left. With a wave of his hand, this matter was over. Wang Yi then asked curiously, Sect Master Yu, I heard that the immortal emperor personally sent a decree to you, I wonder if it's true. The people who were watching the commotion all perked up their ears. It's just a rumor. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand humbly. At this time, 3 more golden streaks of light appeared, the one in the lead was the great bright wheel. Yu Qianqiu and Wang Yi immediately stood up, bowing respectfully, greetings to the great bright wheel master. The surroundings instantly fell into silence. The great bright wheel snorted coldly, "You Qianqiu, you really have guts, actually daring to hit people in my hallucinatory immortal city." Just when everyone was thinking that Yu Qianqiu was going to be out of luck, the great bright wheel's hand behind the great bright wheel's back dropped, slapping 2 items onto the table, saying indifferently, "I've already brought the items you wanted. Today, on account of the immortal emperor, I won't argue with you, but if there's a next time, I won't let you off so easily." Chapter 988. These were the words he said on the surface, but he also secretly transmitted his voice, "Brat, don't cause trouble in my territory. Why do I have so many reasons to protect you? How am I going to manage others in the future?" The great bright wheel was gritting his teeth in anger. From this, it could be seen that he really treated Yu Qianqiu as one of his own because of Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng. If it was someone else, he would have taken care of them long ago. As long as they broke the rules, which sect would dare to reason with him? These words caused Yu Qianqiu to blush with shame. He felt that he had let the other party down. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but the great bright will only let out a cold harumph. The 3 rays of light flew back to the Merchant Association. The surroundings were completely silent. The great bright wheel's words shocked everyone. The meaning of "for the immortal emperor's sake" undoubtedly proved the rumors in the hallucinatory immortal city. It confirmed that Yu Qianqiu had indeed received the immortal emperor's decree to carry out a mission. At this moment, all sorts of expressions appeared on everyone's faces. Most of them were envious. Actually, Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised that the great bright wheel brought out the immortal emperor. He didn't know that the great bright wheel was not only helping him cover up the fight in the hallucinatory immortal city, it was also helping him get rid of some troubles, such as the Heartless Palace. This was the brilliance of the great bright wheel. He could guarantee his own position and help his own people without leaving any traces. At this moment, everyone's eyes were on the 2 items that the great bright wheel threw on the table. A storage bracelet and a token. Wang Yi stood in front and immediately recognized what this token was. He immediately said in shock, "Netherworld token." He looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He didn't know why the great bright wheel gave this to him. So this was the Netherworld token. Yu Qianqiu picked up the palm-sized token on the table and looked at it. There was a mix of gold and black. He used the metal seal to check and found that it was actually a mix of nether iron and gold. The design of the token was actually very simple. It was surrounded by cloud patterns, and one side was engraved with the word "immortal," while the other side was engraved with the word "nether." However, the proportion of nether iron and gold mixed together was so well proportioned that even an average refiner would find it difficult to achieve. Yu Qianqiu even suspected that the person who made this token was also proficient in the gold incantation art. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely. The gold incantation art was created by him, and he only taught it to Hongqi. Seeing that everyone was staring at him, he casually put away the Netherworld Passage token. Huang Xiaolong then picked up the storage bracelet. It was filled to the brim with divine-grade spirit stones. Without even counting, one storage bracelet could hold exactly 10 billion spirit stones. The Immortal Palace was so rich, yet they only gave 10 billion. How stingy! Yu Qianqiu muttered under his breath, then took out a handful of divine-grade spirit stones and put away the storage bracelet. Huang Xiaolong then beckoned to the green-clothed little girl who was looking at him curiously from behind his grandfather, signaling her to come over. The green-clothed little girl immediately shrunk her head back, but the hunchbacked old man pulled her out with a smile, hinting that it was fine for her to go over. The green-clothed little girl was very obedient to her grandfather's words. She slowly moved over with some apprehension, looking at Yu Qianqiu with a puzzled expression. "Stretch out your hand," Yu Qianqiu said, waving the handful of spirit stones in his hand. The green-clothed little girl's eyes lit up. Biting her lower lip, she obediently stretched out her delicate little hand, her 5 fingers adorable and delicate. 2 hands. Yu Qianqiu laughed heartily. The little girl obediently stretched out her hands, and all the spirit stones in Yu Qianqiu's hands were put into her hands. She held the spirit stones in her hands, and without saying anything, she excitedly ran back to her grandfather's side. "It's too much, I don't need so much," the hunchbacked old man said fearfully, signaling the little girl to return the extra spirit stones to Yu Qianqiu. "Causing trouble for you, it's only right." Yu Qianqiu nodded at Wang Yi, then the 2 of them turned into a streak of light and flew away. As the 2 of them left, the onlookers went about their own business, whispering to each other about the immortal emperor's decree to Yu Qianqiu. No one cared about the ordinary grandfather-granddaughter duo. There were also some who wanted to try the green liquor the grandfather-granddaughter duo was selling because of what happened earlier, but the grandfather-granddaughter duo's action of packing up the stall dispelled their thoughts. The hunchbacked old man kept all the things on the stall into his storage bracelet, then pulled his granddaughter and flew out of the hallucinatory immortal city at a moderate pace. Many people only raised their heads to take a glance, then continued with their own business. To most people, there was nothing to be concerned about small fries, and they were even dismissive of them. What they were interested in were the interesting things that happened between the big shots. In a remote valley far away from the hallucinatory immortal city, the mountains were barren, the vegetation was barren, and the rocks were craggy. However, it seemed very quiet. The grandfather-granddaughter duo landed on the ground and slowly walked into the depths of the valley. As they walked, a wooden staff suddenly appeared in the hunchbacked old man's swinging hand. The wooden staff seemed to be made from 2 entangled tree roots, and the brown wooden staff's head was like a large Ganoderma, which looked very strange. The hunchbacked old man walked slowly with the help of the walking stick, his hunchback gradually straightened, and the outline of his body slowly became tall and sturdy. A cool mountain breeze blew over, and his white hair and beard gently fluttered. The drooping skin on his face silently tightened, and his complexion became rosy and smooth. His turbid eyes suddenly became clear and transparent, and his determined eyes revealed the vicissitudes and wisdom of seeing through the mortal world. At this moment, anyone could tell that he was the hunchbacked old man who bowed and scraped in the hallucinatory immortal city. The aura between the 2 of them instantly became like 2 different people. 2 images, one was like a poor old man who was living a destitute life, and the other was like an earth immortal who possessed great wisdom and transcended the mortal world. Unfortunately, no one could see the changes that occurred to the old man. In fact, if the old man didn't want others to see it, then how many people in this world could? On the other hand, the green-clothed little girl didn't show the slightest change. However, she wasn't surprised by the change in her grandfather, and it was obvious that she was used to it. Her green dress fluttered in the wind as she happily skipped through the craggy valley as if she was walking on flat ground. The wind fluttered her green dress, and she seemed like a celestial child that had descended to the mortal world. She played with 2 black spirit stones in her hands, and she occasionally raised her head to block the spirit stones in front of her eyes to look at the blue sky. She would occasionally let out a cheerful chuckle. "Grandfather, when are we going to set up the stall again?" The green-clothed little girl suddenly tilted her head and asked. The sturdy old man, who was walking with the crutch, suddenly stopped and looked at the little girl who was skipping happily in front of him with a complicated expression. The green-clothed little girl suddenly realized that her grandfather's figure had disappeared from her side. She stopped abruptly and turned her head to look. Seeing that her grandfather had stopped moving, she happily skipped back again. She pulled on her grandfather's crutch and asked curiously, "Grandfather, why aren't you walking?" The old man smiled faintly and said, "Lu Er, do you like to play in the world?" The little girl called Lu Er tilted her head and thought for a while. She nodded her head innocently and said, "I like it." "Why do you like it?" "Because there are a lot of people. It's very lively." Lu Er waved her hands and made a gesture of many people. There are a lot of people. Aren't you afraid of meeting the bad guys that grandfather told you about? Like the bad guys who didn't pay for your food and scared you. But there are also good people. Lu'er held a spirit stone in each hand and waved it with a smile that was like a flower. She said, "That person called you Qianqiu is a good person. A good person will help me beat up a bad person." As she said that, she made a trumpet shape with her hands and shouted towards the valley in the distance, "You Qianqiu, you are a good person." Somewhere in the distance, someone was talking to someone when he suddenly sneezed and cursed, F***ck. Who is cursing me? It must be that old bastard Grey Cloud Xan. After a cheerful shout, Lu happily jumped onto a rock. She spread her arms wide open on the rock and danced around in circles while giggling. She looked innocent and pure. The mountain wind blew her green skirt, and she was as light as a green butterfly that was about to flap its wings and fly. Then, a miraculous thing happened. In this desolate valley, wherever her delicate hands pointed to, the withered wild grass suddenly exploded with new vitality and grew at a visible speed. The withered yellow disappeared, and the emerald green wild grass swayed, at the point of her fingers. The broken rodden instantly experienced spring again. The tender green branches sprouted out and quickly grew thicker. New sprouts quickly bloomed on the branches. In a short while, the withered tree once again exploded with exuberant vitality. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a green tree, finger. The old branches of the withered wildflowers were growing healthily. It was clearly past the flowering season, but the flower buds were popping out one by one. They shyly bloomed all over the branches, and it was a beautiful sight, finger. The green vine was like a snake that had awoken from hibernation. It quickly burrowed out from the ground, dragging the green leaves that kept emerging from its body as it climbed all over the hills and slopes. This scene was so miraculous and inconceivable. In the snap of Lu'er's fingers, there was a huge change. With her as the center, the desolate valley was overflowing with spring in the blink of an eye. Green trees formed shade, fragrant grass covered the ground, and hundreds of flowers bloomed. The desolate valley became a green field, making people feel relaxed and happy. Unfortunately, there was only one spectator in this scene. However, this spectator seemed to be used to this scene and did not even look at it. He pointed the wooden staff in his hand at the ground in front of him and said, "Lu'er, stop messing around." The cheerful Lu'er stuck out her tongue and jumped down from the rock. She obediently stood at the place her grandfather pointed at. The old man frowned and said, "Lu'er, remember this. In the future, without my permission, you are not allowed to run out again. Especially you are not allowed to see that person called you Qianqiu again." Lu'er blinked and asked doubtfully, "Why?" The old man said with a serious expression, "Because he is the worst person. He is also the person who can hurt you the most. You have to stay far away from him." "Why?" Lu'er pouted disapprovingly and said, "But I don't feel any malice from him." When the old man heard this, he immediately raised his wooden cane and tapped it on Lu'er's forehead. He warned solemnly, "Lu'er, remember this. Anyone who can smell the fragrance on your body is a bad person. These people are not ordinary people. They will cause you great harm. You have to stay far away from them. Remember." Chapter 989. Is there a fragrance on my body? Lu'er raised her arm and sniffed. She avoided the main point and said, "Why can't I smell it?" Dong! This time, the old man unceremoniously knocked Lu'er's head with his cane, causing her to cover her head and cry. The old man said angrily, "Even if you're curious, there must be a bottom line. You were bribed by him with a few spirit stones. Grandpa has lived for so long and has seen too much. Don't you know what's good and what's bad? Do you think Grandpa will lie to you?" Remember Grandpa's words, stay away from that person called Yu Qianqiu. He's very dangerous. If you dare to disobey Grandpa, Grandpa will never let you come out to play. Oh, Luer said dejectedly. The old man wanted to scold her again, but he suddenly looked around and frowned. You little girl, you're messing around. You leaked the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and alarmed someone. Let's go back first to avoid chattering. He raised his staff and pointed at the empty air. The air in front of the two of them immediately faintly rippled with a pale green profound light. The old man grabbed Luer's arm and stepped into the profound light. The two of them immediately disappeared without a trace. The door of light disappeared into the air, and the valley was empty. Not long after the two of them disappeared, a golden light flashed in the distant sky. It was frighteningly fast, and in the blink of an eye, it landed in the valley. The newcomer stood steadily on the rock that Luer had just been dancing on. He wore a gorgeous golden robe embroidered with a sea of coiling dragons and clouds. He wore a hollowed-out golden crown with complicated patterns. Two thick eyebrows slanted to the left and right of his forehead. His nose was straight like an eagle's hook, and his lips were thin like two blades. His entire body was covered in a thin layer of golden light that was like a curling mist, making people feel intimidated. His entire person was imposing, and his slender eyes emitted a cold light that could take one's soul. The newcomer's cold gaze quickly scanned the entire valley. His perception quickly enveloped the entire valley like a tide. The nearby plants and flowers moved without wind, rising and falling like waves. However, he did not discover anything. Of course, it was not that he did not discover anything unusual. The two ends of the valley were barren. Only the area around him was overflowing with greenery. One look and he knew something was strange. I thought you called me out to meet. Strange. When has old man Mu ever done something so senseless? The person glanced at the surroundings again and muttered with a frown, why are you hiding? I have no ill intentions towards you. I just want to ask you about some things. Sigh. With a long sigh, the person turned into a streak of golden light and disappeared into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. No one knew what had happened in this remote valley. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that he had been talked about here. He had just come out from the Wangu Tong branch, and Wang Yi had personally sent him to the entrance. The two of them looked up at the sky almost at the same time. The four heartless palace disciples who had been staring at Yu Qianqiu had disappeared. Wang Yi chuckled and said, it seems that Ash Grey Cloud Trust has also retreated and withdrawn his people. I thought he really had the guts to go against the immortal palace. Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes and said, what do you mean by that? What does my business with him have to do with the immortal palace? I, Yu Qianqiu, am an upright person. I will never use my power to oppress others. He looked in the direction of the Heartless Palace branch and said in a low voice, I am preparing to make a trip to the Heartless Palace to see if the grudge between me and him can be resolved. Ha! Wang Yi smiled and nodded. He thought to himself, you call this not using your power to oppress others? Why didn't I see you looking for him to resolve your grudge in the past? Of course, he definitely wouldn't say this out loud. After sending Yu Qianqiu off with cupped fists, he couldn't help but frown and mumble to himself, why is this guy asking about the casting of the body in the 72 worlds? After thinking for a while, he still couldn't figure it out, so he shook his head and walked in quickly. He still had to pass on the news to the Wangu Tong Palace. Outside the Heartless Palace branch, the people going in and out stopped at the entrance and whispered to each other. They watched as Yu Qianqiu slowly walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. They couldn't figure out what he was doing here. Those who had come to buy things and were about to leave didn't leave either. They all stayed to watch the show. A disciple of the Heartless Palace had already discovered him and quickly ran back inside to report it. Therefore, Before Yu Qianzhou could step into the Heartless Palace branch, he was blocked at the entrance by Zhang Yun Xian and his people. Zhang Yun Xian's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "What are you doing here?" He was worried now. He was worried that this fearless guy would purposely come here to cause trouble because he had received the Celestial Emperor's decree. However, he couldn't touch this guy now. Honored Zhang Yun, long time no see. Yu Qianzhou smiled and cupped his fists. I am here to apologize to you. I hope you won't pursue what happened in the past. Everyone looked at each other. No matter how they listened, it was a little boring. Zhang Yun Xian's face darkened. He snorted and said, "Don't give me that. If you have something to say, say it. If you have anything to say, say it." He didn't believe that this guy was here to apologize. Moreover, the grudge between them wasn't something that could be resolved with just an apology. Yu Qianzhou looked at the people behind him. He turned back and said with a smile, "Look at this public place. It's inconvenient to say some things here. Let's talk inside." Then, he walked inside. Zhang Yun Xian had never seen such a shameless person. He immediately stopped him. "If you want to say it, then say it here. If not, then scram. I don't welcome you here." Zhang Yun Xian, don't be too ruthless. Yu Qianzhou slowly took a few steps back. He said in a low voice, "Yes, I killed your grandson. But even if you kill me, your grandson can't come back to life. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Moreover, I helped you a lot. It's enough to cancel out the grudge. Why do you insist on biting me? You've done me a huge favor." Zhang Yun Xian was startled. He then sneered. "Are you kidding me? Stop talking nonsense. Scram. I don't welcome you here. Hee hee. What an ungrateful fella." Yu Qianzhou placed his hands on his waist. "You dare to say that if it wasn't for me, you could have broken through to the middle stage of Immortal Emperor? You dare to say that if it wasn't for me, you could have mastered the 3 swords into 1 sword stance? I only hate that I didn't kill you back then." Zhang Yun Xian gritted his teeth. "So you're saying that the grudge between us can't be resolved?" Yu Qianzhou said in a low voice. Zhang Yun Xian shouted. "That's right. Forget it. It's fine if it can't be resolved." Yu Qianzhou's expression instantly brightened up. He generously waved his hand and gently said, "Today, I came to discuss cooperation with you." He was like a completely different person from a moment ago. Not interested. Zhang Yun Xian couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with this fella. He turned and walked into the hall. He said, "Disciples of Heartless Palace, listen up. Don't let him in. If he dares to force his way in, inform the Merchant Association to uphold justice." He had no choice. He couldn't attack this fella in the current situation. Everyone's eyes were on Yu Qianzhou. They didn't know if this fellow would really force his way in. Sigh. Why do you have to do this? Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed. To everyone's surprise, he turned around and flew away in a streak of light. Yu Qianzhou landed in front of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's gate. He walked to the gate and took out the World Commerce Chamber's token. He waved it at the 2 guards at the gate and said, "World Commerce Chamber's Sect Master Yu Qianzhou requests an audience with the Great Bright Will Executor." Wait a minute. The guard threw down this sentence and went in to report. Not long later, he came out and waved his hand. "Controller wants you to find him in the backyard." Yu Qianzhou walked into the Merchant Association and looked around. He passed through the main hall and came to the backyard. He saw the Great Bright Will sitting cross-legged on a stone platform under an old tree. Yu Qianzhou went over and bowed. "Greetings, Controller." The great bright will slowly opened its eyes and looked at him. It frowned. Why do you want to see me? I'm warning you, don't think you can swindle the immortal palace just because you received the immortal emperor's decree. You'll die a horrible death sooner or later. He guessed that this fella didn't come here for anything good. Maybe it was to ask for something. What are you saying? Am I the kind of person who wants a yard after taking an inch? Yu Qianqiu smiled. De Mingluan snorted noncommittally and said indifferently, if you have something to say it quickly. It's like this. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and laughed. Look, I'm going out to collect some local customs in order to compose a song that will be passed down through the ages for the immortal emperor's wedding. Can you ask the immortal palace to send a message to the heartless palace to send the great elder, Zhangyun Xian, to protect me and accompany me to collect local customs? De Mingluan was stunned. He had long been thinking about Yu Qianqiu's intentions for coming. He had thought about everything, but no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't think of why Yu Qianqiu would make such a request. After a while, the great bright will sneered. You must be out of your mind. Everyone knows you have a grudge against Zhangyun Xian. What reason do I have to report to the immortal palace to send such a decree to the heartless palace? It's because I have a grudge against Zhangyun Xian that I picked him. Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. Think about it. I'm going to the netherworld to collect local customs. You should know better than me how dangerous the netherworld is. If there's no master to protect me, I'm afraid I won't even know how I died. Most importantly, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. I'm afraid that there's someone in a high position who doesn't dare to make a move against me in the celestial world but will do something to me in the netherworld. If the immortal palace sends Zhangyun Xian to protect me and something happens to me in the netherworld and ruin the immortal emperor's plan, he won't be able to escape punishment. Plus, I'm always on edge thinking that there's a master who wants to do something to me. I can't concentrate on composing a song for the immortal emperor. In short, he was the most reasonable person in the world. The reason why he went to talk to Zhangyun Xian about reconciliation and cooperation was to get Zhangyun Xian to protect him. Who knew that Zhangyun Xian wouldn't even give him a chance to continue talking? So he asked the great bright will to ask the immortal palace to pressure the heartless palace. Chapter 990. However, now that things had come to this, he had to use, but to explain it. This fellow was not a good person at all. He always believed in the concept of cutting weeds if the roots were not removed. What cooperation and enmity were all nonsense. Finding Ash Cloud Xian to protect him was a lie. He wanted to find a chance to kill him. Normally, the best way was to flatten the entire Heartless Palace. However, it was impossible for him to flatten a colossus like the Heartless Palace with his current abilities. However, taking advantage of his current status as an imperial envoy, it was still possible to think of a way to kill Grey Cloud Xian first. This was why he spent so much effort to get Ash Cloud Xian to protect him. The reason, first of all, the chances of encountering danger in the netherworld were very high, so they really needed the help of an expert. With Grey Cloud Xian's current cultivation and the Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance, he was really a suitable candidate. Just the thought of having such an expert by his side made him excited. Secondly, as he said, Ash Cloud Xian might not dare to do anything to him in the open, but it was completely possible for him to do something in the dark, especially in the netherworld where even immortal emperors could not interfere. Now, the only way was to tie Zhangyun Xian's safety together, then Zhangyun Xian wouldn't dare to make a move against him. Lastly, this was what he wanted to do the most. As long as he brought Ash Cloud Xian with him, he would have a chance to get rid of this hidden danger. After all, Ash Cloud Xian would not dare to do anything to him at that time. Instead, he would have to work hard to protect him, and he would be able to do anything to him. Such a black-hearted method of killing several birds with one arrow had always been easy for him, is that really the case? Demingluan looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. Although he said that, he did not think that Yu Qianqiu had the guts or the ability to do anything to Ash Cloud Xan. He had underestimated Yu Qianqiu's character. If I don't do this, who can guarantee that Ash Cloud Xan will not do anything to me in the dark? Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly as he cupped his fists and said, "Please help me, Senior Great Bright Wheel, for the sake of Senior Yun and Senior Wei." Demingluan's eyes flickered with suspicion. He was experienced enough to sense that something was wrong. Asking his enemy to protect him. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing after living for so many years. He didn't know what this guy's brain was made of. How could he think of such a way? But after thinking about it, he felt that Yu Qianqiu's concerns were not wrong. He paused and said, "I'll try my best. As for whether the Immortal Palace will agree to your request, I can't guarantee it. Wait for my news." Hee. "Thank you, Senior. I won't disturb you any longer. Go on with your business." Yu Qianqiu bowed and left. He was confident in Demingluan's ability. Since the other party had promised to try his best, then this matter should not be far from the truth. As for what the other party would say to make the Immortal Palace agree, that was not something he should worry about. In the large conference room on the 21st floor of the World Commerce Association, under the watchful eyes of Yu Qianqiu, Hu Changshou distributed the corresponding amount of restriction-breaking pills, marrow-cleansing pills, and immortal ascension pills to everyone. Everyone looked at the immortal pills in their hands with mixed feelings. Yu Qianqiu had already explained the pros and cons of taking these immortal pills. Although they could quickly improve their cultivation, there would be a certain shackle on their future cultivation after taking them. Very few people could break through to the great immortal stage and above. Looking at the complicated expressions on everyone's faces, Yu Qianqiu understood what everyone was thinking. If these immortal pills fell into the hands of ordinary soul formation cultivators with no background, they would definitely be overjoyed. But these people were not ordinary soul formation cultivators. Each of them had extraordinary wisdom. Although they were temporarily hiding here, who didn't want their cultivation to reach the peak of cultivation one day? I've already explained everything clearly to everyone. It's up to you whether you want to take it or not. I won't force you. But there's something I want to remind everyone. Yu Qianqiu looked around at everyone and said in a low voice, "If anyone is willing to take it and use it to improve their cultivation, when you go to the Immortal Ascension Passage guarded by the Immortal Palace to forge your immortal body, you must go in batches. When the first batch returns, the second batch will go again to avoid unnecessary trouble." At this point, he didn't say anything else and walked out alone. As for why he didn't use the heavenly lightning to forge everyone's immortal body, he had his own considerations. The hundreds of people here were all in the open. If they used immortal pills to forcefully increase their cultivation, no one could say anything. But if they suddenly all reached the immortal realm without going through the Immortal Ascension Passage guarded by the Immortal Palace, not to mention the suspicion of others, the Immortal Palace would first set their eyes on the World Commerce Association. Some things had to be sacrificed before they could gain. It was impossible for everything to be smooth sailing forever. Yu Qianqiu could only sigh slightly. He still had to hide what he had to hide from everyone for the time being. Who knew that once he left the conference room, he would receive a jade talisman from Wei Chuanqiu, asking him to quickly go to the rooftop. Yu Qianqiu arrived at the rooftop with a face full of suspicion. Just as he was wondering what Wei Chuanqiu was doing, he saw that Demingluan was also there. He immediately walked over cheerfully and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Master." Wei Chuanqiu stared at him with an annoyed expression and asked, "What the hell are you doing? You actually need Grey Cloud Messenger to protect you. Did you take the wrong medicine?" Clearly, Demingluan had already told them about this. "As you wish." Demingluan snorted. The Immortal Palace has already sent a decree to Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing. Yu Qianzhou's eyes instantly lit up. He asked, Heartless Palace agreed. You don't have to worry about this. Deming Luan's gaze suddenly stared in the direction of the Heartless Palace's branch. He said indifferently, there is no room for negotiation with the decree from the Immortal Palace. He has to agree whether he wants to or not. Hee. That's good, that's good. Yu Qianzhou rubbed his hands happily. He was worried that this matter would be troublesome. He didn't expect Deming Luan to help him settle it so quickly. He was indeed capable. Who knew that Deming Luan would look at him coldly and pour cold water on him? Don't be too happy too early. The reason why the Immortal Palace can send this decree is because of the Immortal Emperor. The higher-ups want me to tell you that if the Immortal Emperor isn't satisfied with the result, he will hand you over to the Heartless Palace and let them do whatever they want to you. Yu Qianzhou couldn't smile anymore. It was as if something was strangling his neck. He then said awkwardly, it should be fine. As long as Tsangyan Axian cooperates with me, I won't disappoint the Immortal Emperor. Please help me pass this message to the Immortal Palace. He was indeed scared just now. After all, no one could guarantee that the Immortal Emperor would be satisfied with what they came up with. But on second thought, if he really messed things up, he really didn't believe that the Immortal Palace had the ability to capture him. He still had some confidence in his ability to escape. Deming Luan nodded slightly. His gaze paused on Wei Chuanqiu and Yunpeng's faces. Then, he slowly took out a golden token and handed it to Yu Qianzhou. You said you want to go to the Netherworld, but the Netherworld is not like the Celestial Realm. It is already out of the Immortal Palace's control. It is the Emperor of the Underworld's territory. Plus, the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor have always had small conflicts. No one can guarantee their safety if they go there. Most importantly, even though the Emperor of the Underworld is revered in the Netherworld, because the territory is too vast, the majority of the places have always been in a chaotic situation where warlords are divided. This is the token of authority of the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. Maybe it can help you at a critical moment. Wei Chuanqiu and Yunpeng looked at each other without saying anything. They both glanced at Yunpeng with complicated expressions. Yu Qianzhou, who received the token, was also slightly startled. On one side of the golden token, the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce's logo was engraved. On the other side, there was a moonlit night scene of clouds passing by and a bright moon shining in the sky. This token was the symbol of him, Deming Luan, representing the Immortal Palace to be in charge of the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. Regardless of whether this token was useful in the Netherworld or not, Yu Qianzhou would remember the Deming Luan's friendship. However, this was a different matter. He still had to ask clearly what he needed to ask. It would be troublesome if he did something stupid in the Netherworld. Yu Qianzhou paused and asked, didn't you say that the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld always had small conflicts? Your authority token is also useful in the Netherworld. Wei Chuanqiu and Yunpeng were more or less confused about this. The Deming Luan faintly smiled. Although the Netherworld is chaotic, there is always an Onyx army everywhere in the Netherworld to suppress those restless fellows. This Onyx army is under the command of Madame He Qi. Madame He Qi is also the only subordinate of the Emperor of the Underworld who has the most frequent business dealings with the Immortal World. Although she has never been to the Immortal World, because I am in charge of the World Commerce Chamber in the Immortal World, I have personally gone to the Onyx Palace in the Netherworld several times. Among the people in the Immortal World, I am the one who has the most contact with Madame He Qi and we have some friendship. She will give me some face if there is anything. Madame He Qi. Wei Chuanqiu asked curiously, I have never heard of this person before I cultivated. Is she the woman who is rumored to have hooked up with the Emperor of the Underworld? She is quite a fast climber. Yu Qianzhou was also curious. He had heard of Madame He Qi in the Immortal World. It was said that she had a high position in the netherworld. However, these were all rumors. He didn't know the specifics. Hooked up with the Emperor of the Underworld? Is it that easy to hook up with the Emperor of the Underworld? Forget it. In short, this woman is the Emperor of the Underworld's favorite concubine. Her power in the netherworld is indeed extraordinary. De Mingluan shook his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu. You are in the chaotic land of the netherworld. If you encounter any trouble, you can use my token to find the Onyx Army. I believe Madame He Qi will ask the Onyx Army to take care of you. With the Onyx Army's illustrious reputation in the chaotic land, they can at least save you some trouble. Yu Qianqiu nodded and asked hesitantly, I wonder what kind of person this Madame He Qi is. Is it easy to get along with her? De Mingluan paused for a moment and said slowly with an expressionless face, her cultivation is about the same as mine, but her heart is higher than the sky. She may be ambitious but her ability is average. She is just relying on the prestige of the Emperor of the Underworld. Unfortunately, she doesn't know her place. In short, she is just a vicious woman. You won't have any conflict of interest with her. As long as you don't offend her, she won't do anything to you. Chapter 991. Got it. Yu Qianqiu put away the token. He was a little excited. What did it mean to be on his side? This was what it meant to be on his side. Yun Peng, who had been silent all this while, suddenly asked, Yu Qianqiu brought your token to the netherworld to show off. Will you be in trouble if news of this gets back? De Mingluan smiled. What trouble can I get into? I just accepted the Immortal Emperor's decree to help Yu Qianqiu as much as I can. If someone asks, I'll just say this. Hearing this, the three heaved a sigh of relief. Some people were happy, while others were worried. In the back room of the Passionless Palace's branch, there was a series of crashing noises. The disciples who ran in to see what was going on were chased out by a shout of scram. The tables and chairs inside were all smashed to pieces, and Sungin Axayan was panting heavily as he stood on the broken wood with a red face and neck. High Priest, please calm down. An old man on the side sighed. This person was called Meihe. He was also one of the priests of Passionless Palace. His position in Passionless Palace was second only to Grey Cloud Axayan. He came because Passionless Palace had received the decree from the Immortal Palace. It asked Grey Cloud Axayan to protect Yu Qianqiu. After Passionless Palace's sect master Wang Qing received the decree, he was silent for a long time. No one would be able to accept that they had to protect their enemy after their grandson was killed. Therefore, Wang Qing didn't send a message to Grey Cloud Axayan. Instead, he asked Meihe to come personally. He was afraid that Grey Cloud Axayan couldn't understand and asked Meihe to do the thinking. Before Meihe came, Wang Qing had told him that if Grey Cloud Axayan couldn't accept it, he could contact him. As expected, Grey Cloud Axayan was furious. He really couldn't understand it. He almost destroyed the Passionless Palace's branch. Finally, under Meihe's repeated persuasion, Grey Cloud Axayan contacted Wang Qing angrily. Wang Qing didn't try to persuade him. He only told him that it was true. He did receive the decree from the Immortal Palace. He told him to think of the big picture. Then, Wang Qing cut off the connection, which led to the current scene, just for a song, just for a song. The Immortal Palace has gone too far. Sect leader, why are you forcing me like this? Why are you forcing me like this? Sungin Axayan was so angry that his entire body trembled as he roared, Yu Qianqiu. To him, this was simply an extraordinary humiliation. Not to mention the fact that he couldn't accept it emotionally. Once this matter was spread out, he would definitely become the laughing stock of the three realms. Meihe quickly glanced at his surroundings. Fortunately, he had set up a soundproof barrier in advance. Otherwise, If Grey Cloud Xian's voice was heard, it might cause a lot of trouble for the Heartless Palace. Using his feet to push aside the broken tables and chairs, Mehi walked to Grey Cloud Xian and said with a bitter smile, "You can't blame the sect master for this. Others see our Heartless Palace as the #1 sect in the immortal world, but don't tell me you and I don't know the situation our Heartless Palace is in. It's as dangerous as a pile of eggs. Why are they bullying people like this? Why are you bullying me like this? What do you take us for? Were they worse than pigs and dogs? This is a great humiliation." Grey Cloud Xian clenched his fists and choked with sorrow. Tears streamed down his face, covering his clothes. The scene was very tragic. This undoubtedly explained the problem. He knew that there were some things he couldn't fight back. High Priest. Mehi grabbed Grey Cloud Xian's clenched fists and shook them. "Aren't we worse than pigs and dogs in the Immortal Palace's eyes? Do you think the sect master is feeling good? But we have to look at the big picture." As he spoke, he suddenly transmitted his voice. "I'm afraid that the Immortal Palace is using Yu Qianqiu to test our Heartless Palace." "What does this mean?" "Before we came, the sect master told me to tell you, endure humiliation for the greater good. The sect master told me to tell you that his cultivation level is probably not far from breaking through to the late Immortal Emperor stage. Also, our Heartless Palace already has the 6th form of the sword drawing style. The sect master has been hiding it all this time, waiting for the moment when he's certain of victory." Grey Cloud Xian's body shook when he heard this. His eyes were filled with tears as he exclaimed, "The 6th form. Could it be that the sect master?" He wanted to say that the sect master was waiting for the right time to challenge the immortal emperor, but Mehi patted his fists and stopped him with telepathic transmission. "High Priest, be careful with your words. The sect leader has never mentioned this matter to anyone. He doesn't even feel at ease communicating with you through the transmission technique. But in order to let you know what's going on, he leaked this matter and specially asked me to make this trip. We can't let down the sect leader's painstaking efforts. What the sect master needs the most now is time. Once the time is right, all the old and new grudges can be settled in one day." Grey Cloud Xian was stunned and didn't speak. His eyes were shining. He really didn't expect that the Heartless Palace only had 5 sword stances for so many years. Ever since he was in a desperate situation, he instantly comprehended and executed the 5th stance. He was the clearest about its might. He was confident that few experts in the intermediate stage of the 3 realms would be able to block this move of his. But he didn't expect that the sect master had already created the 6th form of the sword drawing style. How powerful would it be? He couldn't help but get excited thinking about it. He naturally understood the sect master's painstaking efforts. He wanted him to endure the humiliation and give the sect master more time. Once the sect master broke through to the late-stage Immortal Emperor, the Heartless Palace's 6th form of the sword drawing style would be revealed in the celestial world. At that time, it would definitely shock the 3 realms. For the sect master, for the Heartless Palace, Grey Cloud Xian, will swallow this humiliation. Grey Cloud Xian clenched his fists and said while gritting his teeth. Since he could get to this point in the celestial world, he naturally knew what was good and what was bad. Once the sect leader Wang Qing defeated the celestial emperor with the 6th move, the sword drawing style, then the status of him, the #2 figure of the Heartless Palace, in the celestial world could be imagined. "High Priest, you're so righteous." Mehi patted Grey Cloud Xian's fist. His tense gaze relaxed, and he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Before he came, Wang Qing had told him that if he told Grey Cloud Xian such a top-secret matter and Grey Cloud Xian still wasn't willing to endure the humiliation, then what was the point of keeping such a person in the Heartless Palace? To be exact, if Mehi had seen even the slightest hesitation in Grey Cloud Xian, he would have immediately launched a fatal sneak attack when Grey Cloud Xian was unprepared. That way, he would never have the chance to reveal the secret of the sect master Wang Qing. After that, the Heartless Palace would naturally push the blame onto Grey Cloud Xian. If Grey Cloud Xian was dead, then Yu Qianzhou wouldn't have an excuse to say that he was worried that Grey Cloud Xian would backstab him and affect his work for the Immortal Emperor. At least he would be able to answer to the Immortal Palace. In reality, the Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing didn't want to be too ruthless. After all, apart from him, the only person in the Heartless Palace who had mastered the three-sword drawing style was Grey Cloud Xian. He was definitely a great help to the Heartless Palace. If Wang Qing really defeated the Immortal Emperor in the future, how could he not have a reliable top-notch expert under him? However, people at Wang Qing's level would weigh the pros and cons of everything and would never be soft-hearted when it came to abandoning things. Grey Cloud Xian didn't know that he had already taken a trip to the gates of hell. Instead, he swore solemnly and gritted his teeth. Yu Qianzhou, let's see how long you can be so smug for. May he sneered. He's just a fox borrowing the tiger's might. A mantis trying to stop a chariot is overestimating its own capabilities. High Priest, you'll have to suffer for a while. After the Immortal Emperor's wedding, we'll find a chance to deal with him. At this moment, a disciple outside weakly shouted, High Priest, World Commerce's sect master Yu Qianzhou is outside asking to see you. Damned bastard, he really came quickly. Is he here to humiliate me? Grey Cloud Xian pointed his finger towards the outside, once again with a look of uncontrollable anger. May he shook his head at him. He looked at the messy room and quickly put all the messy things into his storage bracelet. Grey Cloud Xian calmed his emotions and wiped his face to dry the tears on his clothes. Then, he removed the soundproof barrier and shouted, Get him in here. This shout was so loud that even Yu Qianzhou, who was outside the gate, was shocked, let alone the yes-man disciples outside. He muttered in his heart, Could it be that this old man is so daring that he dares to harm me? He wondered if Heartless Palace had conveyed the Immortal Palace's decree to this old man. However, he felt that he was worrying too much. Since this old man wanted him to get in here, then he must have received a notice. Yu Qianzhou chuckled. He didn't wait for the disciple who went to report to come out to summon him, and he walked in casually. With Grey Cloud Xian's shout, the other disciples of Heartless Palace didn't stop him. However, the disciples who came here to trade looked at him with disdain. They didn't know why this guy wouldn't let Grey Cloud Xian go. They guessed that this guy was using his master's power. With the Immortal Emperor's decree, he was purposely humiliating Grey Cloud Xian. Was this revenge for the humiliation he suffered in the Paradise Wonderland? When Yu Qianzhou entered the inner room of the rear hall, he discovered that the room was empty. He couldn't help but feel that it was strange. However, when he saw traces of tables and chairs on the floor, he quickly swept his gaze around the room. When he saw traces of things being smashed on the floor and walls, he immediately understood everything. Someone was probably furious and was smashing things to vent his anger. Finally, his gaze landed on an old man who was standing side by side with Grey Cloud Xian. Someone who could stand side by side with Grey Cloud Xian naturally had a high status in Heartless Palace. Yu Qianzhou was slightly startled. Then, he smiled and cupped his hands at Grey Cloud Xian. Elder Grey Cloud Xian, may I know who this person is? Without Grey Cloud Xian's introduction, May he snorted coldly and said, This old man is Heartless Palace's consecrator, May he. You are that infamous scoundrel sect master Yu Qianzhou in the immortal world. The Immortal Palace's decree only asked Grey Cloud Xian to protect Yu Qianzhou. It didn't say that he couldn't be humiliated. These words were no less than a slap to the face. Yu Qianzhou was unhappy when he heard it. He could be afraid of anyone but the Heartless Palace. If he retreated now, Grey Cloud Faith's face would be ugly in the future. Damn! This can't be allowed to continue. His face darkened. I don't care if you don't have a river or a ditch. You're already so old. Watch your mouth. Don't ask for trouble. Chapter 992. How dare you? May, he shouted angrily. One of his sleeves bulged as if it was filled with air, and his killing intent instantly boiled. Sungin Aksayan pressed his hand and said gloomily, "Don't bother with him. It's too easy for him to kill him like this." May, he was slightly stunned. He was here to persuade Sungin Aksayan to swallow the humiliation. Why was it Sungin Aksayan who was persuading him now? Little did he know that some things did not happen to him. Putting oneself in someone else's shoes and experiencing it personally were two completely different things. With his identity and status, how many people dared to bully him? Yu Qianzhou's mouth was born to provoke people like them. Ordinary people could not bear it, let alone a person who was usually high and mighty. "Kill me." Yu Qianzhou's face wrinkled and he sneered, "I'm standing right here. Try and touch me if you have the guts." "I don't think you have the guts." His eyes fell on Sungin Aksayan's gloomy old face, and he said word by word, "I'm not in the mood to talk nonsense with you now. I'll give you 1 day to prepare. Leave with me tomorrow. Goodbye." He turned and left. "You're courting death," Sungin Aksayan shouted. He was indeed irritated. May, he was shocked and quickly pulled him back. Yu Qianzhou looked back at the two of them and sneered. He left without saying a word. It could be said that he came in high spirits but returned in disappointment. He felt that he was not surprised at all. This was the effect he wanted. He wanted to test the other party's bottom line. In the end, only the two old brothers were left in the room. After a long time, Sungin Aksayan turned to Mei and said, "Now you know that this bastard should be killed." Mei felt a little dumbfounded and could only sigh slightly. "Let's focus on the overall situation." Then he frowned slightly and said, "Why do I feel that this matter is a little strange? Could this kid be plotting something? Him? How dare he?" Sungin Aksayan looked disdainful. Mei shook his head and said in a low voice, "How many people with his cultivation have you seen dare to treat us like this? How can he be so calm in front of us? How can an ordinary rogue have this kind of calmness? He probably had ulterior motives for doing so. High Reverend, it's best to be careful. He's just relying on the support of the immortal palace." Sungin Aksayan coldly snorted. Although that was what he said, it could be seen from his slightly contracted pupils that he was already on guard. Not long after the two of them calmed down, a disciple who was in charge of gathering information suddenly came to report that rumors were spreading in the illusory immortal city, saying that the immortal palace had ordered the gray cloud letters to protect Yu Qianzhou. Upon hearing this news, Sungin Aksayan, who had finally calmed down, was stunned. Although he knew that this matter would spread sooner or later, and he would lose face sooner or later, it just had to come at this time. Without thinking, he immediately associated it with Yu Qianzhou. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He roared, "How dare you! Sooner or later, I'll tear you to pieces." With a flushed face, he swung his palm. Boom! A wall collapsed, and dust filled the air. The two brothers stood there motionlessly. The entire illusory immortal city was indeed in an uproar because of this news. Everyone felt that this was impossible. How was it possible for Sungin Aksayan to protect the enemy who killed his grandson, Yu Qianzhou? Therefore, everyone continuously verified the authenticity of the news. In the end, the more they couldn't find the truth, the more exaggerated the rumors became. The next day, Yu Qianzhou, who had settled the matters of the World Commerce Association, once again descended in high spirits outside the Passionless Palace branch. He amiably nodded at the disciples who were originally entering and exiting the branch but were now stunned at the entrance. He smiled at the hostile passionless palace disciples and said, "Tell Tsangyun Aksayan that he can leave." As he watched the passionless palace disciples leave in a hurry, Yu Qianzhou calmly stood with his arms crossed and looked into the hall with a smile. He wanted to see if Tsangyun Aksayan could restrain himself by spreading the rumors all over the place and provoking Tsangyun Aksayan over and over again. If he didn't figure out the other party's bottom line, he would feel guilty. If the other party suddenly launched a sneak attack while the two of them were interacting, then he would be out of luck. It would be good to give the other party a heads up and strengthen the other party's immunity to provocation. Indeed, some time passed. The two gloomy brothers finally adjusted their mentality and slowly walked out. Under everyone's unblinking gaze, Tsangyun Aksayan stared at Yu Qianzhou and asked in a low voice, "Where are we going?" He more or less resigned to his fate. The disciples from the various sects who were watching the show looked at each other in tacit understanding. The meaning behind his words couldn't be clearer. Needless to say, the rumors were true. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and said, "You'll know when we get there." The corner of Tsangyun Aksayan's mouth twitched. He saw that Yu Qianzhou had already taken out a flying shuttle into the air and flashed onto it. He waved at him from above, indicating for him to come up quickly. As Mei cupped his hands to send him off, Tsangyun Aksayan finally gritted his teeth and flashed onto the shuttle. He tried his best to turn his head away from Yu Qianzhou's ugly face. "Where are we going?" Yu Qianzhou said slowly and unhurriedly, "The netherworld." Tsangyun Aksayan was stunned. He turned around to look at the other party, only to see the other party reaching out to the front of the flying shuttle. This was clearly a case of the barefooted not afraid of those who wore shoes. He was acting shamelessly. Tsangyun Aksayan, who was in the air, and Mei, who was at the gate, had dark expressions on their faces. The surroundings were completely silent. Everyone's gazes looked at Tsangyun Aksayan from time to time, then looked at Yu Qianzhou, who was about to fall asleep in the flying shuttle, High Priest. Mei's voice came to Tsangyun Aksayan's ears with a long sigh. Tsangyun Aksayan's expression changed. Right now, he wanted to skin Yu Qianzhou alive, but, in the end, he still gave in. In his eyes, Yu Qianzhou was just a little trash, and it was not worth it for him to be unlucky together with him. The figure in the air suddenly disappeared, and Tsangyun Aksayan stood at the front of the flying shuttle on the ground. A gust of air rushed in all directions, and the flying shuttle suddenly stabbed into the sky. The passionless palace branch's gate was filled with boos and hisses. Yu Qianzhou, who was lying in the flying shuttle with his eyes half closed, finally opened his eyes. Looking at the white clouds floating in the blue sky, the resentment he felt from being humiliated in front of everyone in the paradise immortal realm was finally vented a little, and his entire body felt much better. Looking at Tsangyun Aksayan in front of him, who didn't even turn his head back, the scenes that had happened in Wuxiong's mansion once again appeared in his mind. In fact, it didn't take more than a day for the things that had happened in the hallucination immortal city to spread to Wuxiong's external affairs Grand Commander's mansion in the paradise immortal realm. In the beautiful back garden, in a pavilion with rolled-up beaded curtains, the golden-robed external affairs Grand Commander's wife, Mu Tianzhao, was sitting in the pavilion with a frown on her face. Her father, Mu Bing, was constantly ridiculing Yu Qianzhou's shameless actions in the hallucination immortal city. Mu Bing, relying on his identity as the external affairs Grand Commander of Wuxiong's immortal palace, could be said to frequently travel between the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and the Paradise Immortal Realm. He spent most of his time in the Paradise Immortal Realm, and most of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce's matters were handed over to his disciple, Nan Tianlong. Regarding this, he had nothing to worry about. With his current identity, even if he wasn't there to oversee the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, no one would dare to cause any trouble. There was no lack of people in the world who had been oppressed for a long time, but once they made a comeback, they instantly forgot everything. They enjoyed the feeling of getting whatever they wanted, and they even wantonly played with power. The world called these people petty people intoxicated by success. Mu Tianzhao held her forehead with one hand and placed her elbow on the stone table with a plate of fruits and ambrosia. I just don't understand why the celestial emperor would let that shameless person compose a song. It's simply the biggest joke in the world, father. Mu Tianzhao, who was deep in thought, suddenly raised her head and stopped Mu Bing from continuing. Her eyes were faintly filled with grief and indignation as she said, "Father, how dare you talk about the celestial emperor behind his back? Aren't you afraid of incurring his wrath and implicating me and Wu Xiong?" Mu Bing's expression changed, and he quickly looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he heaved a sigh of relief, but his heart was still pounding. He also knew that he had gotten a little carried away just now and spoke without thinking. However, the atmosphere in the pavilion became a little awkward. Mu Bing was now more or less a taboo towards this daughter of his. After all of his glory came from this daughter. In the end, it was Mu Tianzhao's expression that eased first. No matter how bad the other party was, he was still her father. She faintly sighed and said, "Father, please don't talk nonsense in the future. Just treat it as thinking about your daughter's happiness and leave some leeway in your mouth." Of course. Of course. It was just a slip of the tongue, that's all. Seeing that his daughter was no longer angry, Mu Bing quickly took the opportunity to explain, "I'm not talking about the celestial emperor. In fact, what I want to say is that the real culprit is that woman with the surname Liu. She must have said something to immortal Empress Ji Wu. Otherwise, why would the celestial emperor let that Yu Qianqiu compose a song? Look at that Yu Qianqiu, he's a typical despicable person. Once he succeeds, he considers everyone beneath him and acts recklessly in the illusionary immortal city." Mu Tianzhao slowly stood up, looked at Mu Bing, and earnestly said, "Father, listen to me. After all, that Yu Qianqiu once did our Mu clan a favor. Back in the divine ruin realm, if it wasn't for his help, would have already died there. Even if we don't put that aside, he doesn't have any deep hatred towards us, so why do you hate him so much?" "Just why? It's just that I can't stand his despicable behavior," Mu Bing weakly replied. In reality, it was because Yu Qianqiu made him lose face at Mu Tianzhao's wedding last time. His current temperament no longer allowed his subordinates to be rude to him, and Yu Qianqiu was now a typical servant in his eyes. Not to mention, Yu Qianqiu talked back to him in front of so many people, which seriously hurt his self-esteem. Recently, he had already prepared to use his powerful influence to teach Yu Qianqiu a good lesson and let Yu Qianqiu know what it meant to have a difference in status. Who would have thought that at this time, Yu Qianqiu would suddenly receive the decree of the celestial emperor? A decree personally issued by the celestial emperor. While Mu Bing felt a taboo, he was also a little jealous. As Wu Xiong's father-in-law, he had never received a decree from the celestial emperor, but a lowly servant actually received such an honor. Old resentment and current jealousy made his heart feel very uncomfortable. Whether he is a true gentleman or a despicable person, it has nothing to do with us. Mu Tianzhao suddenly paused as if she noticed something. Her bright eyes stared at Mu Bing's face, and she bit her lips. "Father, do you want to do something to him?" "Oh. What does father-in-law want to do to who?" A hearty laughter suddenly came from outside. The father and daughter turned their heads to look and saw Wu Xiong striding from the entrance of the garden with a smile on his face. Mu Bing also immediately smiled and quickly walked out of the pavilion. He looked at Wu Xiong and smiled. "The Grand Commander has returned." "Father-in-law." Wu Xiong very politely clasped his hands together, then reached out to grab Mu Tianzhao's hand. The two of them smiled at each other and walked into the pavilion. They sat on opposite sides of the stone table, giving off the feeling that they were close friends. Wu Xiong looked at Mu Bing who followed them in, then looked at Mu Tianzhao and asked, "Madam, what did you say father-in-law wants to do? Why don't you tell me?" Chapter 993. Milord misheard. Mu Tianzhao shook her head helplessly. I just don't think it's a good idea for father to stay here for too long. He should go back and put more effort into managing the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Mu Bing's expression changed slightly when he heard this. A trace of resentment flashed across his eyes as he looked at his daughter. He felt that his daughter was unhappy because he had spoken too much about Yu Qianqiu and was chasing him away. For a moment, his heart was filled with jealousy and hatred for Yu Qianqiu. Oh. Wu Xiong made a noncommittal sound and glanced at Mu Bing. After interacting with his father-in-law for a period of time, he naturally had some understanding of his character. He faintly smiled and said, Madam is worrying too much. Father-in-law will naturally arrange for someone to take care of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. There is no need to personally attend to this matter. If it really doesn't work, it's better to close down the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and open a bigger one in hallucinatory Immortal City. That way, it'll be closer. If father-in-law agrees, I'll greet the Great Bright Will Keeper of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and make things easier for you. Good. Great Commander, this is a good idea. Mu Bing smiled happily. No way. Mu Tianzhao shouted and suddenly stood up. She glared at Mu Bing and said sternly, Father, have you forgotten that Mother died for the Four Links Chamber of Commerce? Are you really going to shut it down without any consideration for old ties? Her entire face turned pale and her expression turned stern. Tears appeared at the corners of her eyes. She had always been strong, but it had been a long time since she had cried. In fact, there was something she didn't say. If it wasn't for the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, if it wasn't for her mother's painstaking efforts, why would she have to compromise and marry here? The Four Links Chamber of Commerce held too many memories of her deceased mother. It could be said that it was her emotional sustenance and the home of her heart. It could not be desecrated. The pavilion instantly quieted down. Mu Bing stood there awkwardly. Wu Xiong was also slightly stunned. Mu Tianzhao had always been a gentle and virtuous woman in front of him. This was the first time he had seen her so angry, and it was directed at her father. After Wu Xiong came back to his senses, his face was filled with relief. From this, it could be seen that his woman was a woman who valued friendship. He had not misjudged her. He stood up and walked to Mu Tianzhao's side. He grabbed her hand and comforted her. Madam, don't be anxious. Since Madam is unwilling. As he said this, he looked at Mu Bing and said, I think we should drop this matter. Father-in-law, you may as well focus on running the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. If there is anything you need, just let me know. I will do my best to help. Once the Four Links Chamber of Commerce had enough capital to expand, it wouldn't be too late to establish a branch in hallucinatory Immortal City. In fact, most sects and chambers of commerce did this. Sometimes, moving too fast might not be a good thing. What does father-in-law think? Since he said so, what else could Mu Bing say? He nodded awkwardly. He was too embarrassed to face his daughter here, so he squeezed out a smile and said, I have something to do at home, so I'll go back first. Wu Xiong could feel Mu Bing's awkwardness and also felt a little embarrassed. After all, this was caused by him. He immediately stretched out his hand and said with a smile, I'll see you off, father-in-law. Mu Tianzhao bit her lips as she watched the two men leave. Tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. She never thought that something she held so firmly would be so disdainful in her father's eyes, as if he could abandon it at any time. Outside the External Affairs Grand Commander's residence, one could see the undulating mountains and the beautiful scenery. Wu Xiong, who had sent Mu Bing to the edge of the cliff, looked at the ashen-faced Mu Bing and said with a faint smile, We're all family. Father-in-law, please don't take Madam's words to heart. You should know that she has no ill intentions towards you. Mu Bing's lips moved. After a moment of hesitation, he said, It's not like that. The reason why Tianzhao is so angry is that Yu Qianqiu is to blame. Yu Qianqiu. Wu Xiong was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't figure out why this matter had something to do with Yu Qianqiu. He asked in surprise, what does it have to do with Yu Qianqiu? She was fine before. It was only because she heard about Yu Qianqiu's shameless actions in the mystic immortal city that she became unhappy after I said a few words about Yu Qianqiu. That's why she lost her temper and wanted me, her father, to leave. Sigh. Mu Bing's eyes flickered. Wu Xiong's gaze instantly turned cold. He looked at Mu Bing and said indifferently, what do you mean by this? Please don't misunderstand, Grand Commander. It's not what you think. Mu Bing waved his hand. He naturally wouldn't say that he wanted to use someone else to do his dirty work. He sighed and explained, Grand Commander, you might not know this, but when Yu Qianqiu first came to my Four Links Chamber of Commerce, he once pursued Tianzhao. I could tell at a glance that he wasn't a good person, so I firmly opposed him. Tianzhao also didn't take a liking to him, but I couldn't stand that guy's relentless pestering, so I might have been tempted. Fortunately, I noticed that something was wrong in time and drove that kid away. However, that kid couldn't forget my Tianzhao. Later, when the Grand Commander proposed to you, that kid was afraid of the Grand Commander's prestige and gave up. However, I never imagined that you would invite him on the day of your wedding. That's why I was so unhappy at the time and was a little rude to him. A suppressed murderous aura faintly circulated around Wu Xiong's body. How many men could tolerate another man coveting their beloved woman? His eyes flickered as he recalled Mu Tianzhao's first night. He felt that she hadn't done anything wrong to him, so his killing intent gradually retracted. Wu Xiong said indifferently, Father-in-law, let's not mention the past. Otherwise, it won't be good for anyone. Not to mention, I don't want to pursue the past. Mu Bing was slightly surprised. He didn't think that Wu Xiong would be so magnanimous. However, when he recalled the killing intent Wu Xiong emitted earlier, he regained his confidence and said, but I can't stand to see such an ambiguous matter. That kid's mouth is famous for being foul. I'm afraid that he will say something that will affect Tianzhao's reputation. As a parent, how can I tolerate such a thing happening? If there are any signs, I must find a way to put an end to it. Wu Xiong was startled and suspiciously asked, you want to kill him? Mu Bing firmly nodded. Wu Xiong immediately frowned and said, Father-in-law, don't be reckless. He received the immortal emperor's decree to carry out his mission. If something happens to him, it's not something you or I can bear. But I heard that he wants to go to the netherworld. Mu Bing gloomily looked at Wu Xiong and said word by word, if something happens to him in the netherworld, what does it have to do with you and me? Wu Xiong looked at Mu Bing in surprise. He didn't expect Mu Bing to be so scheming. It seemed that he had underestimated Mu Bing. Wu Xiong originally wanted to persuade him to let go, but for some reason, he thought of the golden statues in his bedroom. It was a gift from Yu Qianqiu to congratulate him on his wedding. It had always been placed on Mu Tianzhao's dressing table with the words, forever and earth, carved on it. Occasionally, he would see Mu Tianzhao staring at the golden statue in a daze. When he asked her why, she said that she hoped the two of them could be as eternal as the words carved on the statue. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but have a big question mark in his heart. Was there no other reason? For a moment, he felt a stabbing pain in his heart. Wu Xiong slowly said, Father-in-law, you should give up. He has Zhangyan Axayan by his side to protect him. Right now, Zhangyan Axayan's cultivation has reached the mid-stage of the Immortal Emperor stage. He has also mastered the Heartless Palace's famous 3 swords as one sword drawing form. Not to mention father-in-law, even I am not his match. Although Wu Xiong's words were meant to dissuade him, Mu Bing's 7 apertures were miraculously smooth today. Their hearts were connected, and he could actually hear the softness in Wu Xiong's tone. Therefore, it could be said that sometimes, the power of hatred was extraordinary and could make people stronger.